So, from YouTube to gaslighting, very similar topic if you ask me. Today we're going to go deep into the topic of gaslighting. We're going to expose a series of techniques hitherto unmentioned anywhere on the internet and largely even in scholarly literature. It starts with an article published in the Washington Post. The article is titled Gaslighting, How to Recognize Gaslighting and Respond to It. It was authored by Angela Haupt. And it says something that I've been saying over the past 10 years. It says, gaslighting made the leap from psychological lingo to trendy buzzword with the 2016 presidential campaign. More recently, it has morphed into what Ackerman calls a catch-all phrase, often used incorrectly by people referring to simple disagreements over issues or interactions that don't meet gaslighting's historical definition. Some mental health experts, continues the article, are concerned that overusing the term could obscure the abusive nature of gaslighting and reduce its power to help victims recognize ongoing manipulation. For them, for these mental health practitioners, and myself included, it's important that gaslighting retain its original meaning, the experience of having your reality repeatedly challenged by someone who holds more power than you do. We're going to expound on this later in the video, and I'm going to finish the video with a series of techniques you can use to fight back gaslighting. Gaslighting is exactly like extending a hand and reaching into your mind and then scrambling it. It's as bad as this. And it uses a series of techniques. Some of them would be familiar to you, but you probably had never associated these techniques with gaslighting. We start with déjà vu. Déjà vu is when the strange looks or sounds familiar, when the unprecedented, or when something that hadn't happened yet, something that you're experiencing, is perceived as a past experience. So when a present experience is perceived as a past experience. Now we can do it with words. For example, I keep using the word Shoshanim, or a very old German word which I've just invented, Geschlimpf, which means to destroy, devastate, Geschlimpf. The more often I use these words, these are, at least Geschlimpf is a nonsensical word, but the more often I use these words, the more familiar they become. It's when the strange begins to look familiar. Déjà vu is a French word. It expresses the feeling that one has lived through a present situation before. Some people, of course, immediately interpret déjà vu as a kind of paranormal or supernatural experience, precognition, or a prophecy. But in reality, it's an anomaly or memory. There's a strong sense of having been here, of a recollection, the time, the place, the smells, the tastes, the ambience, the sounds, everything, the practical context of the previous experience seems to apply to the current experience. But this is because of uncertainty, because of the impossibility of it all. I will come to it in a minute, and I will explain how déjà vu is applied in gaslighting by abusers. Now, gaslighting is much more typical of psychopaths than narcissists. Narcissists believe their own lies, they confabulate, and so they adopt and appropriate their lies, and then they defend their lies vehemently if you challenge them. Psychopaths are goal-oriented. They know exactly what they're doing. And the aim of gaslighting is to unsettle you, to destabilize you, and to allow the psychopath to introduce into your mind anything he wishes. Again, shortly we will discuss how this is done. There are two types of déjà vu. The pathological one, which is frequently associated with epilepsy, and it is usually prolonged or frequent. There's other symptoms involved. There are other symptoms like hallucinations. It's an indicator of a neurological or a psychiatric illness. That's not the kind of déjà vu I'm talking about. The déjà vu I'm talking about is non-pathological. It happens to healthy people. Actually, 2/3 of the population have had a déjà vu experience, one or more. Now we know that déjà vu happens when there is dislocation, when there is disorientation, and therefore there's a close affinity between déjà vu and dissociation. For example, people who travel often or travel frequently have more déjà vu experiences than the normal population. People who watch movies, movie buffs, aficionados, addicted to movies, they are much more likely to experience déjà vu than other people. So, detachment, dissociation are critical. And this is what the abuser does to you. What he does to you, he detaches you from your own experiences, from your own reality. And this renders his reality familiar to you. Because you can't really compare his reality to your reality, you tend to lie to yourself, to deceive yourself into believing that his reality is normal, has always been there, is familiar. That's a very important point that you need to understand. What gaslighting involves is not only a divorce between you and your reality testing. It involves a substitution effect. The abuser provides you with an alternative to your own experience, to your own world, to your own reality, to your own universe. And because you had been detached from your roots, so to speak, because the abuser obliterates your own memory, challenges your own identity, his reality becomes like a life raft. You cling on to his reality because you have no alternative. The first stage in gaslighting is destroying who you are, destroying your trust in yourself, destroying your perception of reality and your reality testing, destroying your self-efficacy, your ability to operate in the environment in order to extract positive outcomes. You begin to disbelieve yourself. You begin to distance yourself from yourself, a process known as estrangement. And then the abuser comes into this picture, anomalous picture of derealization, depersonalization, and amnesia that he had induced in you. He had induced these dissociative states in you. So then he comes and says, well, I have a solution for you. I have a solution for you. You're very amnesiac, you depersonalize, derealize. I have a solution. Here, let me give you my reality, my world, my universe, my perceptions, my experiences, my interpretation of what's happening. And because you don't have your own alternative anymore, you cling to his. People who tend to experience déjà vu are often fragile and vulnerable. They're depressed, they're anxious, they're stressed, they're under high pressure. Research clearly shows that the experience of déjà vu is associated with other mental health conditions, however transient. It also decreases with age. We are less amenable to such manipulation as we grow older because the weight of cumulative experience is too great, too big for a single abuser to undermine. Abuse via gaslighting, therefore, leverages, takes advantage of our vulnerability, our fragility, our brittleness, our anxiety and our depression in order to supplant our existence in one reality with another. It is a form of metaverse. It is a virtual reality. Gaslighting is about creating a virtual reality and then convincing you that it's the only reality in existence. And one of the main tools the abuser uses, however unknowingly, to accomplish this goal is entraining. I've mentioned entraining in several videos and in my dialogues with Richard Grannon. Entraining is a process of coordinating brain waves. Now, usually, entraining clones brain waves via music. When people play the same music or listen to the same music, there's a total synchronization of their relevant brain waves. And this is entraining. But I suggested, and I still do, that entraining can be accomplished with other sounds, not only music. For example, verbal abuse. If verbal abuse has a refrain, if it has a rhythm, if it has a kind of embedded harmony, then one can conceive of verbal abuse as a form of music. And this leads to a phenomenon known as semantic satiation. Semantic satiation. Semantic satiation is a psychological phenomenon where repetition causes word or phrase to lose meaning for the listener. If you repeat the same word thousands of times, ultimately you will discover to your shock and consternation that the word means nothing to you. We perceive repeated speech as meaningless sounds, and this is exactly the power of entraining, because verbal abuse, repeated ad nauseum, repeated constantly, becomes sound. It becomes music, which essentially is meaningless, and therefore it penetrates your linguistic defenses. It goes deep into your reptile brain, down to the brainstem. Music stimulates very ancient areas of the brain, in addition to the neocortex and the prefrontal cortex, but very ancient parts of the brain. That's the power of music. That's why we react to music so profoundly and emotionally. And the repetition of the verbal abuse renders it meaningless. So our linguistic centers disengage, and instead we perceive these words as a form of wall of sound, as a kind of music. Extended inspection, extended analysis, for example, staring at a word or looking at a phrase for a very long period of time, has the same effect like repetition. Exactly the same effect. Semantic satiation. When we are exposed to written or verbal abuse repeatedly, it loses its meaning and it becomes music, and it entrains our brain. It coordinates our brainwaves, the brainwaves of our abuser. In the cortex, verbal repetition arouses a specific neural pattern that corresponds to the meaning of the word. Rapid repetition makes both the peripheral sensory motor activity and the central neural activation fire repeatedly, and this causes what we know as reactive inhibition. This is a reduction in the intensity and sensitivity of the activity with each repetition. Habituation is like if you put pressure on your arm. At first you feel the pressure, but after a while you get used to it and it no longer registers. James Jacobowitz called it in 1962 experimental neurosemantics. And there are numerous studies that have substantiated every single word I've just said. I'm referring you to Jacobowitz, it's an early study, but also Pilotti, Antrobus, and Duff in 1997, and Kouinos in 2000, and numerous others. So this is a well-substantiated phenomenon. And so by entraining, semantically satiating you, the abuser creates a coordination, a synchronicity between his brainwaves and yours, which grants him total access to your mind and allows him to obliterate your previous identity memories, experiences, perceptions, and to supplant, to substitute them with his own. A good description of gaslighting. And in this process, the abuser acquires authority. There's a power asymmetry because of intermittent reinforcement and trauma bonding. The abuser is on top. So there is a power gradient. We're going to discuss it later when we come to classic theories of gaslighting. So the first mechanism is déjà vu. The second mechanism used in gaslighting is exactly the opposite. Jamais vu. Jamais vu, never saw. The familiar is made to look or to sound strange. Again, it's a French phrase. I don't know why the French, why French, why they caught on to all these techniques and mechanisms, but it's a fact. It means never seen. It's experiencing a situation that one recognizes in some fashion, but that nonetheless seems novel, unsettling, unfamiliar, anxiety-inducing. It is the opposite of déjà vu. Jamais vu involves a sense of eeriness, creepiness. There's an impression of experiencing something for the first time, despite knowing rationally that you had experienced it before, several times. So, jamais vu also is associated with aphasia, amnesia, epilepsy. So it's a dissociative state, exactly like déjà vu. And like déjà vu, the abuser induces in you jamais vu. It is precisely the abuser's ability to produce conflicting states of mind, conflicting dissociations, that gives him his immense power over you. Jamais vu is commonly experienced when a person momentarily does not recognize a word, a sound, a sight, a place, a time, that they know that they know. They just don't feel that they know. So there's a divorce between cognition and perception of emotion, perception of sensa. On the one hand, you know that you've been here before, you know you've done that before, you know you've experienced it before, but you don't feel that you had. So this creates a divorce between you and reality. And it is this daylight between your perception of yourself and your perception of reality, this crack, this abyss, that allows the abuser to get through and enter your mind. Anyone repeatedly writing or saying a specific word out loud has this notion. It begins to feel like, no way is this a real word. No way I've heard it before. And this is an example of jamais vu. Jamais vu is associated with a delirious disorder, intoxication, substance abuse, delusions such as the Capgras delusion, and so on and so forth. So it has its place in the pantheon of pathologies of the human mind. It also induces the imposter syndrome. You begin to feel so unreal that you begin to experience yourself as an actor, as an imposter. In other words, the abuser had exported to you his own self-perception. Most abusers are dissociative, many of them are narcissistic, and they perceive themselves as spectators, as observers of a movie. They perceive their lives as a kind of film or flick that they're watching or observing with some mild interest. They don't really inhabit, abusers don't really inhabit their lives. They're from the outside. Their lives are like theater productions. They're like directors or actors. So by inducing in you a combination of déjà vu and jamais vu, they make you feel the same. This is the initial phase of narcissistic contagion, when the narcissist infects you with a virus of narcissism, and you're beginning to see the world through his eyes. You're beginning to perceive yourself as unreal as he perceives himself. You're beginning to adopt his cognitive distortions. You're beginning, for example, to adulate him because you had accepted his grandiosity as a realistic assessment of the world. It's very similar to depersonalization. The very reality of reality is doubted, derealization. Abusers also use, in order to gaslight, déjà vécu. Déjà vécu means I had already lived. It's an intense but false, wrong feeling of having already lived through the present situation. It's a form of déjà vu, but much more intense. It's very akin psychologically to a true flashback. There's no such thing as emotional flashback. It is nonsensical hype. But there is such thing as flashback or revividness. Flashback or revividness are the outcomes of post-traumatic, hallmarks of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And so déjà vécu is a mild, faint form of flashback, because for a minute there, you lose the distinction between reality and delusion. For a minute there, you're really into the alternative reality proffered to you and imposed on you by the abuser. Unlike déjà vu, déjà vécu has behavioral consequences because people act in the environment as if it were some other reality than what it is. It compels you to abandon reality and to enter a virtual reality, a second life, a metaverse. There's an intense feeling of familiarity. And so you prefer to withdraw from real life events or activities and inhabit this fantastic space known as paracosm. And patients who have déjà vécu justify their feelings of familiarity with beliefs that are essentially delusional. Now, the abuser induces in you déjà vécu by penalizing you if you refuse to adhere to his reality, if you refuse to enter the reality space that he had created for both of you. It's a cult-like setting. You're like in a cult. And if you oppose the cult leader, which is the abuser, or especially the narcissistic abuser, then you're penalized. On the other hand, in addition to the stick, there's a carrot. If you do accept the abuser's reality and act accordingly, if your acceptance of his reality has behavioral manifestations which he can monitor and witness, he rewards you. He gives you a prize. He praises you. He elevates you. He renders you his favorite, etc. So there are very strong incentives with intermittent reinforcement involved. There are very strong incentives to let go of real reality and to adopt the fake reality, which is the abuser's reality, thereby experiencing periods of déjà vécu. And so these are the mechanisms that are used in gaslighting. There's another much less known mechanism, which is what Michel Foucault, the famous social theorist and critic, Michel Foucault called it déjà là. In Madness and Civilization, A History of Insanity in the Age of Reason, which is a book he had written and published in 1961, Folie et déraison, Histoire de la folie à l'âge classique. So in 1961, Michel Foucault examined the evolution of the meaning of madness in culture, law, politics, philosophy, and medicine, especially in Europe, from the Middle Ages until the end of the 18th century. And Foucault being Foucault, it's a bit of a complex thing, but I will read to you an excerpt from this book. And remember, we're discussing gaslighting, and one of the mechanisms which are very, very not known obscure, stealth, ambient, under the radar, surreptitious, very pernicious and nefarious mechanism used by the abuser is déjà là. And so Michel Foucault described déjà là this way. He said, up until the end of the 15th century, or perhaps slightly beyond it, the death theme, the theme of death, reigns supreme. The end of mankind and the end of time are seen in war and the plagues. Hanging over human existence is an order and an end that no man can escape, a menacing presence from within the world itself. Suddenly, as the 15th century, suddenly as the 15th century drew to a close, that great uncertainty spun on its axis, and the derision of madness took over from the seriousness of death. From the knowledge of that fatal necessity that reduces men to dust, we pass to a contemptuous contemplation of the nothingness that is life itself. The fear before the absolute limit of death becomes interiorized in the continual process of ironization. Fear was disarmed in advance, made derisory by being tamed and rendered banal, and constantly paraded in the spectacle of life. Suddenly it was there to be discerned in the mannerisms, failings and vices of normal people. Death as the destruction of all things no longer had meaning when life was revealed to be a fatuous sequence of empty words, the hollow jingle of a jester's cap and bells. The death's head showed itself to be a vessel already empty, for madness was the being already there of death. Death's conquered presence, sketched out in these everyday signs, showed not only that its reign had already begun, but also that its prize was a meager one. Death unmasked the mask of life and nothing more. So this is typical Foucault. This is a translation of Khalfa and Murphy in 2000. It's a typical Foucault. I'll try to translate Foucault into normal language. What Foucault says is, in the 15th century, Western civilization transitioned from having a preoccupation with death to having a preoccupation or an obsession with mental illness. Foucault says it makes sense because to be crazy, to be mad, is similar to being dead, mentally dead. And so mad, crazy people and dead people are no longer functional. They're no longer able to participate in reality. One could say that they are no longer in society. Foucault says that this cultural transition from the emphasis on death to the obsession with madness happened when Western society realized this similarity between being crazy and being dead, and realized that madness is just as bad as death. It's essentially a form of death before the physiological form. It seems that there is a notion of death before death, and this is déjà là. Now, how does this fit into gaslighting? Gaslighting involves a process of killing you mentally. It involves a process of driving you crazy. Madness. The abuser introduces madness into your system. He chaotizes it, crazy making. He makes you doubt your own existence. To all practical purposes, you die. And then the abuser offers you a resurrection. He gives you the option to be reborn, a second life, a second chance. But the condition is that you accept his reality. You will never die, tells you the abuser, as long as you're with me, as long as you occupy and cohabit with me in the same space, as long as you become an internal object, an extension of me, without will, without degrees of freedom, without challenge or criticism. And this is déjà là. Okay, back to Angela Haupt of the Washington Post. Do you remember the article published in the Washington Post a few days ago? Here's what she says about gaslighting. Gaslighting is a manipulative form of communication where a power differential exists, said Angela Corbel, an associate professor and chair of communication studies at Widener University in Chester, Pennsylvania. Gaslighting can occur in romantic relationships or friendships between parents and children when seeking medical care or at work. I see it as one party distorting information and preying upon another's vulnerability, said Corbel. She likened it to a more sophisticated way of looking at bullying. Medical gaslighting, by the way, is very trendy right now. It's when a medical professional downplays a patient's concerns, tries to persuade the patient that their symptoms are imaginary or the result of mental instability. Back to the article. Gaslighting, continues Haupt, gaslighting is a devastating psychological tactic, combining elements of manipulation, control, and exploitation of trust, said Naomi Torres-McKee, a psychologist at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City and head of research at the Mental Health Coalition. Torres-McKee continues, those things, manipulation, control, exploitation of trust, those things are the building blocks of gaslighting. Gaslighting is also a pattern of behavior that occurs over a long duration and not on a one-off basis. A gaslighter will repeatedly twist events to shift blame to someone else, and this emotional abuse can result in victims questioning their sanity. Experts previously believed that gaslighting was always intentional, but they now think that it's possible that some gaslighters are not aware of their manipulative behavior, which is something I've been saying for well over 15 years. Even when the narcissist gaslights, he is not aware that he is gaslighting. His gaslighting is not intentional. He fully believes in his alternative, extended, augmented virtual reality. Psychopaths gaslight intentionally. The article continues. Over the long term, being on the receiving end of gaslighting can lead to lowered self-worth, feelings of insecurity, depression, and anxiety. It can also cause someone to be consumed with self-doubt, said Torres-McKee, who has worked with many patients who have experienced gaslighting. It can be difficult to trust people in the future or to connect with people, she said. Plus, you often feel very disconnected from yourself because of this experience of feeling out of touch with what's real and what's not. The article lists a series of signs that you're being gaslit and connects gaslighting to toxic relationships, wish to control someone, and losing grip over the partner. So it's a desperate attempt to regain control over the partner. And the signs listed are invalidation of your emotions. People who gaslight often trivialize or invalidate their victims' feelings. Very undermining comments are common, Torres-McKee said. For example, someone might say, "You're just being dramatic," or "Why do you care about this so much?" Other common phrases include, "You're too sensitive," "You're crazy," "You're imagining things," and "Don't get so worked up." I can add to this a long list like "You're paranoid." And so invalidation is an integral part of gaslighting. It is very disorienting, and you begin to question how you feel, question yourself, question your reality because of this invalidation, especially when the abuser is in a position of authority or when you admire the abuser, which is the common cult-like setting with narcissists. Another hallmark of gaslighting is the twisting of reality. The article says, people who gaslight will flip things and twist them back on you, Torres-McKee said. They will be adamant that you did or that you said things You know you did not. Torres McKee describes a situation, one partner calling the other stupid. Then that person says, hey, you called me stupid. Projection. The person who initially made the derogatory comment might then say, I didn't call you stupid, you called me stupid, etc., etc. So these are lies intended to distort reality and control the situation. But in the case of many narcissists, they don't realize it's a lie, owing to very powerful mechanisms of reaction for defense mechanisms like reaction formation, projection, and splitting. Same with borderline. Very often they don't realize that they're projecting or splitting. Gaslighting involves coercion. The gaslighter forces you to admit that you're wrong. And if you refuse to admit that you're wrong, you're penalized, you're punished. He forces you, for example, to apologize. Even if you are the one who feels betrayed, gaslighters change the narrative. They blame shift. They victimize, self-victimize. They make you feel bad and guilty and ashamed and ego dystonic, and so you end up accepting their reality. You end up apologizing. They say to you, you made me do it. They pin their bad behavior on you somehow. You're the source. And if you're a people pleaser, you take responsibility for things you didn't do. This is called autoplastic defenses. The gaslighter is always assured, confident, strong, explosive, repetitive. He entrains you. He makes you feel déjà vu and jamais vu and all these mechanisms. Jamais vécu, déjà vécu. And so you're in a state of disorientation and you don't know what to trust and who to trust anymore. It's much easier to simply succumb, to surrender, to become submissive and to say, you're right. You're right, I've been wrong and I've been wrong all along. It leaves you mistrusting your perception. You start doubting yourself, constantly questioning what is real and were you overreacting? Did you misunderstand a certain situation? The article quotes Ackerman. If you start to have a disproportionate amount of doubt in yourself that was not previously there, that's a sign of gaslighting. You may think, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I am paranoid, maybe I am too sensitive. Whatever that person is calling you, his voice is in your mind. This is entraining. He's taking over your mind. He implants his own voice in your mind. It's an introject. It's an internal object. It's and you can't get rid of it. In early childhood, this is known as the imago processing, but it can happen to you as an adult. The abuser regresses you to early childhood and then implants his voice in your mind. And you tend to repeat like a parrot, like a robot, like someone without a will, like a zombie. You tend to repeat this voice in your mind. If this voice says you're paranoid, you would say, well, maybe I'm paranoid. If this voice says you're too sensitive, say, well, maybe I'm hypervigilant and hypersensitive. You tend to blame yourself. And you need to understand that you're being gaslit. You need to identify the situation of gaslighting. Is there a power asymmetry? Is there a question of trust? Did you give up on reality as you had known it? Are you beginning to mimic your abuser? Resonate with him, repeat his phrases ad nauseum? Did he take over? You need to recognize a takeover, a hostile takeover. It's a subtle form of interpersonal abuse because the abuser often doesn't attack you personally. He attacks reality. He doesn't tell you something's wrong with you. He tells you something is wrong with your reality. And so it's kind of a by proxy abuse, vicarious abuse. And so it's under the radar. It's very difficult to spot and to tackle. But just knowing that you're abused, just labeling it gaslighting, that's very, very important. And Some therapists says you are giving yourself some clarity and removing the extra tax on your brain as it struggles to make sense of what's happening. Pay attention to how you feel. Journal. Write a journal. Write it down. Every time you're in doubt, write it down. Document every event, however minute, however inconsequential. You're brewing coffee, take a photo. You're saying something, record yourself. Document, document, document. Create hundreds of photographs a day in order to fight back. Ask yourself, how do I feel when I'm around that person? Corbo suggests the following questions. Do I feel anxious? Do I fear that the person is going to contradict me? Do I find that I might be really confident and outgoing when I'm not with him, but when I'm with him, I feel fuzzy? Do I think that something's wrong? Can I identify what's wrong? Write times, write dates, write down places, document feelings, make a detailed minutiae record of your life so that whenever you self-doubt, you can go back to this record and remind yourself how things truly were, how things stood, how did you feel. No one will be able to gaslight you because this kind of record creates self-trust. Gradually, you will not need these crutches. I mean, you will stop journaling and you will stop writing and documenting everything down once your self-confidence, self-esteem, and sense of self-worth had been stabilized, regulated, and restored. Assert yourself. If he starts to gaslight, stop the conversation. Torres McKee says, assert your own reality as much as you can and as much as is safe. You could say, no, you were the one who called me stupid. Don't twist it. Don't try to gaslight me. It sounds, as Peck says, another psychologist, Peck says, it sounds like you're having a really hard time hearing what I'm saying. I know what I felt, and it's important for me to voice this. This is what you should say to your abuser. It doesn't sound like you can take in this perspective. I no longer want to engage in this conversation. You're gaslighting me. If you're ready to hear how I felt and to discuss it, I'd be open to do this at a later time. Walk away. Call someone you're close to. Restore your reality testing. Tell a friend, I know this thing happened, and he's trying to tell me that it's not true. I need to share this with you in order to ground myself. Torres McKee continues, otherwise, you only have that one person who is telling you this false reality, and it's easy to get swept into that reality. Enlist support. Use other people as external memory. Your identity crucially depends on input from other people, and don't hesitate to involve authorities or structures within your environment. For example, if you're being gaslit at work, involve the human resources department. If you're being gaslit by a dangerous abuser, involve the police. Don't hesitate to involve not only your social network, not only your friends and family. Remember, sunlight disinfects abuse. In extreme cases, you would need to walk away. You would need even to resign your job. But until then, try to confront the gaslighter. Address the situation. Torres McKee suggests saying, hey, you're telling me something, but my sense is this other thing is right or true. How can we account for this difference? Try to reason with the gaslighter, because many gaslighters, I repeat, don't know what they're doing. See if you can find colleagues who may be experiencing the same thing with the same person. Torres McKee continues, there's strength in numbers. If someone is doing it to you, it's likely they might be doing it to more people, and it can help you get support. And finally, of course, talk to a professional. If the gaslighting had been all-pervasive and lasted for many, many years, this voice is embedded in your mind. You need to separate, individuate from your abuser. It's exactly like being a 2-year-old, exactly like undergoing this traumatic process all over again without a safe base. So you need a safe base, and your safe base could be your therapist. Recovering can take years. You need to work with a therapist because you need to feel safe and you need to have external validating input. Gaslighting is emotional abuse. This person has taken over your life. Talking to a professional breaks this pattern and provides a counterweight to your gaslighter. The therapist is a modeling agent. You model yourself after the therapist. It provides you with a good enough parent, as opposed to the bad or dead parent that your abuser is emulating. Use all these tools. Gaslighting is dangerous for your mental health. It's possibly the most dangerous technique that abusers use, and that is saying a lot. You're about to watch yet another video about gaslighting from a different, unusual, eccentric angle. As usual. Before I go there, I want to remind you, there are two types of gaslighting. One, often discussed and analyzed, and of course, with a lot of misinformation and nonsense, that is verbal gaslighting. But there's another type of much neglected gaslighting, behavioral gaslighting. Gaslighting via signaling. For example, virtue signaling is a form of gaslighting. It's when a behavior, a pattern of behavior, a type of conduct, choices, decisions, and actions convey information about reality which is erroneous, wrong, misinformation, disinformation. The gaslighter behaves in ways that mislead the target or the victim into misapprehending and misperceiving reality, misjudging it. So certain behaviors and certain actions, certain courses of action are intended essentially to manipulate other people, to modify the behaviors, to secure favorable outcomes. This is behavioral signaling gaslighting, as distinct from the first type, which is verbal gaslighting. Bear this in mind as you proceed into the remainder of this video. But before we go there, two service announcements. This is Mongolia. No, Mongolia is a bit bigger. This is a postcard from Mongolia, from the Enkh Empire, Enkh, E-N-K-H, Empire Publishers in Mongolia. And they just published the first volume of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited in, what else? Mongolian. We are very proud and excited to see this rendition of Malignant Self-Love, and we are grateful to our publishers there. Enkh Empire, E-N-K-H, Empire. Well done. The next service announcement has to do with a series of forthcoming videos about woke movements and victimhood movements. And together with Jordan Peterson and other scholars, I helped Ginger Coy compile a taxonomy of the psychopathology of woke movements. It is now available on public.substack.com. This is Michael Schellenberger's and Peter Boghosian's blog. You can also watch interviews I've given to these various personalities and so on and so forth. But shortly within the next few days, I'm going to release two video compilations. One, interviews that I've granted regarding woke movements and victimhood movements. And these interviews have never been seen. They are not on this channel, so they're new. And the second part is a compilation of all the videos I've made about the psychological underpinnings and psychological theories that pertain to victimhood movements and woke movements. So in two parts. This is it. This is as far as service announcements. and let us delve right into the issue of gaslighting. This is going to be a very short video. Really, Vaknin? You're not kidding. You promise. Please, you're not gaslighting us. No, Shoshanim, I am not gaslighting you. It's like the famous liar paradox, you know. There's this guy, he says, I always lie. Here's the problem. If he's telling the truth, then he doesn't always lie. But if he always lies, then definitely he's telling the truth. Same here. I am not going to gaslight you. Trust me. Okay, today we're going to deal with a few issues related to gaslighting. And apropos gaslighting, my name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, a former visiting professor of psychology and currently on the faculty of CIAPS, Commonwealth for International Advanced Professional Studies. It can't get any longer. Here's the problem. Victims of narcissists and victims of psychopaths experience gaslighting the same way. They have an identical experience and they label it gaslighting. A victim cannot tell the difference between the narcissist's confabulations and the psychopath's cunning and scheming lies. As far as the victim is concerned, he or she is being gaslit. Now, this is the victim side, but this channel is an academic channel and deals with clinical psychology. So we need to have a look at the perpetrator side, the narcissist, the psychopath. Gaslighting requires premeditation. Gaslighting requires power asymmetry. And gaslighting requires an unimpaired, intact reality testing of the perpetrator. So the perpetrator of gaslighting needs to know the difference between reality and his lies. He needs to be able to tell the distinction between fantasy and reality. Number one. Number two, he needs to intentionally gaslight. There needs to be premeditation. Premeditation, planning, cunning, scheming, essentially malice, malevolence. The third requirement is power asymmetry. I will not go into it right now. So, by these criteria, only psychopaths gaslight. Throughout the gaslighting, the psychopath knows full well that he is lying, he's deceiving, he's distorting, he's falsifying, he's reframing. He knows exactly what he's doing. And at any minute, he can tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. What's out there and what's fantastic. The psychopath maintains intact, perfect reality testing throughout the gaslighting process. Second thing is that psychopaths use gaslighting, instrumentalize it, weaponize it to obtain outcomes. They're goal-oriented. Only psychopaths gaslight. Narcissists truly believe their own fantasies and confabulations. Their reality testing is impaired beyond repair. And they don't do it intentionally. They do it instinctively. They do it reflexively. They do it automatically, the way perhaps an artificial intelligence machine would do one day in the future. This is their programming. If there's anyone the narcissist gaslights, it's himself. The narcissist self-gaslights. Then he becomes convinced of his own fantasies, confabulations, narratives, fiction, and he tries to sell it on to you, tries to convince you, cajole you, and convert you into his view of reality, of which he is 100% convinced. That's why narcissists are vehement and defensive when you challenge their confabulations, because they don't feel that they're lying. Now, of course, I'm not talking about white lies and small lies. Everyone lies. I'm talking about major lies, like future faking, for example. Narcissists don't future fake. They believe in the future. They believe that you're going to get married and have 3 children and live happily ever after. They believe they're going to become the richest man in the world. They believe they're going to divorce and marry you. They believe all this. They don't future fake. Psychopaths do, because they want your money, or they want to have sex with you, or they want you to provide them with access or contacts or whatever. There's a reason there. There's something behind the scenes. There's a hidden agenda, ulterior motive. That's the psychopath, not the narcissist. How do you experience gaslighting? Gaslighting is a form of dissociation. I am pretty shocked and surprised that I couldn't find this very basic insight anywhere in the literature, scholarly and YouTube self-styled expert nonsense. I couldn't find it anywhere. But stop to think about it for a minute and you will see how right I am, because I'm always right. Gaslighting is a form of dissociation. We know of 3 types of dissociation: amnesia, forgetting things; derealization, when we experience reality as unreal, dreamlike, nightmarish; and depersonalization, when we experience ourselves as not being there, as floating above our bodies. This is not happening to me. This is common in trauma states or post-traumatic conditions. So these are the 3 forms of dissociation, and immediately you see the parallels between dissociation and gaslighting. Because when you experience gaslighting, reality doesn't feel real. You are forced to derealize. The psychopath or the narcissist force you to derealize, to let go of reality, to lose your grasp on it, to doubt your own judgment regarding reality, and then to adopt alternative facts and alternative reality. And this is derealization. Similarly, when you are in the throes of gaslighting, you feel that you are not you. You feel that somehow you have abandoned and vanquished your own identity. You feel alienated and estranged from yourself. You feel that someone else has taken over. You feel body and mind snatched. This is gaslighting. And so this is a form of dissociation. But how does the narcissist succeed, or the psychopath, succeed to induce in you this state of affairs, this state of mind? How do they coerce you into dissociation? Via entraining. The narcissist uses entraining to convert you, the victim, into an extension of himself. He renders you an internal object. But not only does he regard you as an internal object, you begin to regard yourself as a figment of the narcissist's imagination and mind. You lose your reality. You feel unreal. You feel that you are reduced to 2 dimensions, a cartoonish figure in the narcissist strip. The narcissist assimilates you, subsumes you, takes over you, brainwashes you, if you wish. I don't know which of these terms appeals to you, but somehow you lose who you are. You lose your substance, your quiddity, your identity, your core. You become diffuse. You become like a cloud, like smoke and mirrors. And then the narcissist inhales you in, and you become an element in his mind. And this is done via entraining, and I encourage you to watch my videos on entraining. And this allows the narcissist to treat you as if you were a part of himself, not a separate external object, because narcissists don't do external objects. They cannot perceive other people's externality and separateness. They don't realize or cannot conceive of other people as out there with your own needs and wishes and priorities and emotions and cognition. No such thing. As far as the narcissist is concerned, you're an avatar. You're just part of his imagination. So the narcissist proceeds to experience himself vicariously through you, the victim. Narcissists use victims as extensions of themselves, as internal objects that allow them to experience themselves by proxy, via the victim. The narcissist experiences his own dissociation, his own derealization, his own depersonalization through you. He then forces you to become, or coerces you to become, a part of his shared fantasy, and he experiences his fantasy through you. Gradually, you merge and fuse on a cellular level with the narcissist until nothing is left of you. You become one of his tissues. I mean, organic tissues. So the narcissist kind of digests you and then uses you as you're an object, you're an internal object. He uses you to experience himself. And this is what people erroneously call the narcissist gaslighting. The narcissist has to confabulate in order to bridge over substantive memory gaps. He needs to invent narratives and stories that make sense somehow of his disjointed, disrupted, broken existence, discontinuous non-identity. He has to make sense of all this, mess. The same way someone with multiple personality disorder, used to be called split personality or dissociative identity disorder, also tries to make sense of her existence. The narcissist is doing the same. He's trying to make sense of it all, and he creates stories that are plausible, probable, likely. Yeah, it must have happened this way. There's no other way. And then it becomes reality, becomes the truth, and then he imposes this on you, and you perceive it as gaslighting. It's not. It's a desperate attempt to convert you, to force you to confirm to the narcissist that his fantasy is not a fantasy, it's reality, that his confabulations are not mere or pure inventions, they've actually happened. He wants you to tell him that his false self is not false. He wants you, in short, to become his reality testing. And this is the narcissist gaslighting. Psychopath is an entirely different thing. And if you want to understand the psychopath gaslighting, why not watch the two original movies titled Gaslight, where you see a scheming, cunning con artist who marries a rich woman and then absconds or tries to abscond with her property and wealth and money by convincing her that she's going insane. This is gaslighting. This is psychopathic gaslighting. It's goal-oriented, it's premeditated, it's carefully planned, meticulously planned, every detail, and it's intended to drive you insane, to convince you that your grasp of reality has slipped and you're no longer with us. You're no longer there. Your dependency on the psychopath grows as the gaslighting proceeds, to the point that you no longer trust your own senses. You need to see everything and hear everything and taste everything and judge everything through the psychopath. You lose your agency, and he becomes your external regulator and external agent. This does not happen with the narcissist. The narcissist is not goal-oriented. His goal is for you to become his reality tester, for you to tell him what is reality. Psychopathic gaslighting and narcissistic so-called gaslighting are exactly the opposite. The psychopath wants to become your reality. The narcissist wants you to become his reality. But he wants you to become his reality, which is fantastic and confabulated. And that's why you feel mistakenly that he is gaslighting you. Okay, listen guys, this is video number 246 that I've made about gaslighting. Really, there's nothing more I can say. If I didn't dumb it enough for you, dumb it down enough for you, then I'm afraid I'm the wrong guy. Go and look elsewhere. This is the most basic way I can discuss psychopathic gaslighting versus narcissistic confabulation, which is misperceived as gaslighting. So I hope I made some sense. and help you to differentiate between these two phenomena. Although I repeat again, as victims, this doesn't matter to you because the experience is identical. So walk away, no contact in both cases. Have a nice lit but not gaslit day. Okay, Bubot. Today, yet another video about shared fantasy. This time, we will try to look at it from a different angle. You seem to have some difficulties in comprehending the concept and some of the behaviors attendant on the concept. And this is because the narcissist is inconstant, not consistent. The narcissist is not consistent because the narcissist is dissociative. The narcissist is discontinuous. You have this assumption of an individual with a beginning and an end and something in between. A continuity, like, I don't know, a flat line or an ECG line. Narcissists are not like that. Narcissists are packets. Like IP in computers, they're like packets of information. And in between, there's a void, there's deep space, there's darkness. The narcissist erupts into life and then is extinguished. Erupts, extinguished, like a candle in bad shape. And so because of that, narcissists don't maintain stability, consistency. They don't have what we call inner construct validity. It's very difficult to capture the essence of the narcissist. One day, for example, he could be enormously, incredibly, romantically jealous. And the next day, he can turn a blind eye to any shenanigans, any ostentatious infidelity that you may engage in. One day triangulation is going to work wonderfully. And the next day, he's going to, be immersed in something else, in obtaining supply, for example. And isn't going to give a hoot where you're going and with whom, what you're doing. And then you say to yourself, but it's like not the same person. Well, it's not the same person. It's about what I've been saying for 25 years. It's a form of dissociative identity disorder. It's a private case of a multiplicity of personalities or personality fragments, or what we call self-states. Okay, so I'm trying to explain shared fantasy from this angle. And together with the previous videos on shared fantasy, you ought to have complete view of the dynamic. I also strongly recommend that you download the 3 graphics, violet, blue, and white graphics of the relationship cycle map with the narcissist, graphics created by Haley Martin. Similarly, Haley Martin created a graphic about contempt, the various types of contempt that narcissists feel, and psychopaths, by the way, feel towards other people. And all these graphics are available on my new Instagram channel, Narcissism with Vaknin. One word, Narcissism with Vaknin. My previous channel had been blocked by Facebook owing to your kind complaints. So on this channel, this Haley Martin helps me with creating images of memes of things I say. So you have the relationship map there and so on, but you can also download the relationship map from my website, and there are links in the description to one of my videos. You can find links to this, and don't forget to have a look at the contempt graphic created by Haley Martin. As an aside, the pandemic seems to have transformed all of us into Saudi women with niqabs. We all walk around with veils hiding our faces, so we have all been rendered onto Saudi women. The Saudi women finally conquered the world and exported their fashion everywhere, courtesy Dr. Fauci and others. Jokes aside, masks are good for you. I was very strongly against masks when the pandemic started, but the pandemic has been mismanaged so egregiously by politicians and the medical establishment that now we have no choice. It's out of control. It's really a threat. Now we have made it into a threat. And now we must protect ourselves by any means possible, if necessary, by becoming a Saudi woman. Nothing wrong with that. You should try it from time to time. And apropos Saudi women, I have a few clients who are Saudi women, and I want to remind you that during the pandemic, I don't provide face-to-face counseling, and therefore I don't provide cold therapy, because cold therapy relies crucially on a phase of face-to-face counseling, level 1. Instead, I provide cold therapy technique counseling. I'm using techniques from cold therapy in phone and email counseling. And you can write to my email, samvaknin@gmail.com. Samvaknin, my name, @gmail.com. And I'll respond. You can also go to my website and ferret out my counseling page. You can have counseling with me, you can have counseling with Lydia, and you can have counseling with both of us, a joint session. Today I would like to discuss two phenomena. The first one I dwelled upon, and that's the shared fantasy. But another phenomenon which I would like to discuss today is what I call self-gaslighting. Now, gaslighting, as you might recall, is when abusers, they don't have to be narcissists or psychopaths, and actually narcissists don't use gaslighting as often as psychopaths do. But any abuser, abusers tend to make you doubt your reality testing. They make you doubt your sanity, your orientation. They make you doubt your interpretation of events. They make you doubt the explanations, the narratives that you construct to explain to yourself what's happening, to render life in its kaleidoscopic myriad manifestations meaningful. So they make you doubt meaning. They make you doubt significance. They make you doubt causation, what led to what, who did what to whom. They make you doubt your sanity, your grasp of reality. And they do this in a variety of ways, which put together are known as gaslighting. And so, but sometimes you're doing it to yourself. And this is gaslighting, self-gaslighting. Now, how did I come to that? I mean, how was I reminded of that? The other day I received a direct message from someone saying to me, and she wrote to me, "You see that you are a fraudster? Your prediction about remdesivir, the drug that had just been approved by the FDA for the treatment of COVID, your prediction was totally wrong, and everything you said was wrong." Now here's the interesting thing. I was among the first, if not the first, but definitely among the first, in late February and early March, to suggest that the only class of antivirals that's going to work with COVID-19 is remdesivir, anti-Ebola antivirals. I dedicated at least 3 separate videos advocating, and I'm talking about the beginning of March, advocating remdesivir as a treatment for COVID. I extolled the virtues of remdesivir. I analyzed the mechanism of action of remdesivir. I suggested to start with clinical trials of remdesivir. And I said extremely clearly, several times, that ultimately and finally, all the other drugs will prove to be inefficacious, with one exception, remdesivir. And I had been right. Well, there's dexamethasone as well, but remdesivir is it. This is the name of the game. It's the only antiviral that works against COVID. So I was wrong. I was dead right. I was very, very right. Why did she, suddenly I began to ask, why did she think, how could she think that I were wrong? She claimed to have listened to the videos. How could she have reached a conclusion that I were wrong? that I was wrong about remdesivir when I was seriously right about remdesivir. What mechanism in her mind? What made her mishear, misinterpret what she'd heard? And that was self-gaslighting. She's not a fan, as you realize, yes? She hates my guts. So she wanted to hear. She wanted to listen to the video and to reach a conclusion that I had been mistaken. She expected to hear that I, being a fraudster, got it wrong. She came to the video, she watched the video with preconceptions, with expectations, and with very, very strong desire to prove me wrong. And this predisposed her to hear something which was not in the videos. Utterly, absolutely not. There's no way to listen to these videos and get it wrong. So she was not actually listening to the videos. She was listening to her inner voice. She was listening to processes and dynamics in her mind that pushed her to falsify reality, to confabulate, to reframe, essentially to lie to herself and to lose reality testing. She was no longer in touch with reality. What was she doing? She was gaslighting herself. She removed herself from reality into a delusional space. In that delusional, fantastic space, all her wishes came true. Sam was a fraudster, and he got it wrong about remdesivir and the pandemic, because that's what she wanted very much to prove. So what was actually said in the videos was blotted out, deleted. You have this power, especially as victims. You hear what you want to hear. You hear what you expect to hear. You anticipate humiliation, rejection, abuse, torture, torment, agony, pain, exploitation, and then you gather information from the environment, including information about your abuser, and you reassemble it. You reframe it, you put it together in a narrative that justifies your expectations, validates your fears and concerns, and upholds your view of your abuser. You have a negative view of your abuser. You don't want to hear anything that contradicts this negative view. You're going to fend it off. You're going to firewall. You're going to ignore it. You're going to repress it and deny it. So any positive information about your abuser will be eliminated. Or even worse, you will take the information and reframe it like this woman. I was saying in the videos, I don't know, maybe 50 times. I mean, many, many times. Remdesivir is great. It's going to cure COVID. What did she hear? Remdesivir is wrong. It's not going to cure COVID. She heard exactly the opposite. That's what she wanted to hear. You are doing this as well. You're gaslighting yourself. Now, nothing wrong with it. It's not a pathology. It's known as confirmation bias. When we are emotionally invested, when we are cathected, deeply emotionally invested in any mental process, for example, in trusting someone, or in distrusting someone, or in experiencing pain, or in being traumatized, or in being very afraid. Whenever we are emotionally invested in a cognitive or an emotional process, our brain shuts off, deletes, represses, denies, and ignores any information that challenges the theory that you had constructed, or the bias that you had formed, or the narrative that you have put together. At some point, you create a theory about other people and about specific other people, like your abuser. You create a theory about the world and about specific events occurrences and circumstances in the world. For example, your relationship. Now, these theories are very dear to you. You're emotionally invested in these theories. You want to protect them. You don't want them to be challenged. You don't want them to be undermined. You don't want anyone to tell you you're wrong, because that's narcissistic injury. It challenges your grandiosity, and all of us have grandiosity. It's a normal state of things. So you don't want to listen to any of this. My abuser is abusive, is an animal, is bad, is evil. I don't want to listen to anything which will undermine this or contradict this or challenge this. And if I do, if something penetrates my firewall, if there's an intrusion and some bit of information comes in which kind of unsettles the precarious tower that I had constructed, I'm going to reframe this piece of information. I'm going to lie to myself. I'm going to gaslight myself. I'm going to ignore reality. I'm going to impair my reality testing. It's not only about abuse. It's about everything. About political candidates. The supporters of Donald Trump don't want to hear anything bad about Donald Trump. And when there is an avalanche of seriously bad things about Donald Trump, they reframe these things. Every shortcoming becomes an advantage. Every misdeed becomes smart and clever conduct. Every disempathic, seriously wicked comment becomes irony and proof of sense of humor. Everything he does and everything he says is reinterpreted, misinterpreted, recast, reframed, confabulated. The supporters of Donald Trump create narratives that shut out, shut off, delete and ignore any information or data which contradict their already well-established theory of who is Donald Trump, what is Donald Trump, who are the enemies of Donald Trump, who are the friends of Donald Trump, what's Donald Trump going to deliver, and when. Same with Obama supporters. Same with Adolf Hitler supporters. Same with any personality cult. So self-gaslighting is an integral, very crucial process of establishing an inner equilibrium, an inner peace. A sense of calmness and resilience allows us to carry on with our lives. If we were to question all the time everything we think we know about other people, about specific people, about the world, about events, about morality, we would never get anywhere. We would freeze. The world, anyhow, bombards us with gigantic amounts of information. Studies have shown that we absorb only 5% of the information that is offered to us by reality. Otherwise, we would drown. We would freeze like a very bad tablet or device. We'd simply freeze. So it's a denial of service attack if we open ourselves to all the information out there. We have to choose. We make selections and choices all the time. And we make sure that the selected data, the selected info, fits well with previous info, with previous data, and with the theories within which we accommodate this data and information. And this leads, of course, to resistance to learning, resistance to change. And don't think that this is only among laymen. In my own profession, among my colleagues, I frequently encounter resistance to change. That's true in physics, where I'm active. That's true in psychology, where I'm active. That used to be true in economics, where I was active. When I was active in that field, there is enormous resistance. Thomas Kuhn wrote a book called a book about scientific revolutions, and he said that a paradigm shift, changing your mind, changing your view of how things work, is a very excruciating and onerous process. People are resistant. People fight to death to maintain their views and ideas of the world and not to accept any challenge or change. I'm right now in the throes of suggesting a new conception of addiction. And, there is this dogma that alcohol is a depressant and that alcoholism is a brain disease. Let me share something with you. There's no proof of either. If anything, alcohol is a dysregulator. So it leads to ups and downs in moods, in emotional processing, and so on. But ups and downs, not only downs. Anyone who drinks will tell you this. When you drink, you feel good. You have the buzz. You don't feel bad. You don't become depressed. You become depressed a bit later, or a lot later, the day after maybe. But you're depressed the day after, probably also because of hangover and other effects. It's not a depressant, it's a dysregulator. This minor change, just to accept reality that alcohol it's not a depressant, it's been a mistake. We were mistaken. No one accepts it. You should see the fighting over this. And when I suggest that if 40% of the brain is dedicated to addictions and to processing addictions, maybe addiction has an evolutionary advantage somewhere. Maybe it's a positive adaptation, not a negative thing. Wow, you should see the reactions. You know, alcohol is a disinhibitor. It's a disinhibitor. It makes you actually feel good. So an addiction is a normal state. And these modifications, it's a fourth world war, third world war, I don't know what to call it. Is it a brain disorder or a disease? Here's another bit of nonsense. Yes, of course, alcohol has an effect on the brain. Everything has an effect on the brain. Sugar has an effect on the brain. I mean, everything has an effect on the brain. Everything that passes the brain-blood barrier has an effect on the brain. But what caused what? What preceded what? We definitely don't have answers to this. And to say that alcoholism is a brain disorder is to lie. You know, I don't mince words. That's not only nonsense, it's fallacious, because we don't have any conclusive studies that demonstrate that alcoholics were born with a specific proclivity or disorder or abnormality or dysfunction in the brain. None. So, you know, don't feel bad. Self-gaslighting is whenever people defend the status quo, whenever they don't want to exit their comfort zone, whenever they had developed laboriously with a lot of investment, a lot of thought, a lot of dedication, a worldview, an opinion, a judgment, and then they would take information and data and falsify them and transmogrify them and transform them and ignore them and deny them and repress them and combine them wrongly with other pieces of data and information and do anything in their power to preserve the equilibrium, the homeostasis. This is self-gaslighting. I said that remdesivir will prove to be the cure to COVID, ultimately. She heard that I said exactly the opposite. Why? She wanted me to be wrong. I'm the abuser, I'm the monster, I'm the narcissist, I'm the psychopath. She couldn't accept that I may have been right. She wants me to be a fraud. She wants me to be wrong. So she misheard, and she didn't mishear a single instance. She misheard 3 hours of videos. That's the power of self-gaslighting. Now to shared fantasy. Karen and Gammon. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Karen and Gammon started in the black community. The blacks gave these monikers, used these monikers to describe whites. Karen was a grandiose, entitled, contemptuous white woman. Irritable, irascible, aggressive, unpleasant white woman. And Gammon was the male equivalent of Karen. It started in communities of color. But then it emerged, as usual, by the way, minorities always lead the way. Trends start with minorities. High status minorities like elites, like aristocracy, intellectual elites, or low status minorities, but always minorities. Change starts in minority communities because they have very little to lose. They can gamble, they can take risks, they seek novelty. Their only chance is to unsettle the existing established order. That's the only way to progress. So everything starts there. That's the ferment. So black communities were using Karen and Gammon, and then about 20 years later, it became, now everyone is using Karen and Gammon, and now it applies not only to whites, but equally to people of color. And grandiosity, entitlement, contempt are colorblind. And when I describe the narcissist and the relationship cycle of the narcissist, many people said to me, well, that's a Gammon or a Karen. You're describing a Gammon or a Karen. Not really, but step by step. I want to start with a comment by Anna Monte, if that's her real name. Anna Monte is a viewer, saw one of my videos and left a comment. Thank you, Sam. You gave me all the final answers and the strength to understand and wake up. Every narcissist takes you in with the mask of a father, and the wonderful fantasy ends when you realize that under the mask there is just a child full of pain. You abandoned him because you wanted a man. Thanks. And I thought, this is a wonderful summary within a single sentence of the entire dynamic. So I'm going to read it to you again. And there's nothing you can do about it. Every narcissist takes you in with a mask of a father, and the wonderful fantasy ends when you realize that under the mask there is just a child full of pain. You abandon him because you want a man. Thanks. Thank you, Anna Monte. And I answered, yes, exclamation. And most women cut off the sex with the wunderkind, genius child, or with the sexless father guru, and they seek intimacy with a man, or they abandon the narcissist altogether. There is no infidelity, I wrote to her, there's no infidelity or unfaithfulness involved, even when there is deception, even when there is cheating. So I distinguish two elements. There's the sex with a man outside the marriage, extramarital sex, or some other form of betrayal, non-sexual betrayal. But there's going outside the marital bond, going outside the couple. And in a normal couple, in a healthy couple, that would be unfaithfulness, infidelity, adultery, but not with a narcissist, in my view. There may be deception. The intimate partner of the narcissist may lie to the narcissist about her behavior, what she did last night. That's deception. It's an entirely different issue. But there's no unfaithfulness and there's no infidelity. Women, when someone is with a narcissist, with a narcissist intimate partner, she doesn't prefer another man to the narcissist. She prefers a man to a child, or to a father, or to a guru. She opts for a man rather than for these other roles. You see, if you have as an intimate partner a healthy, normal, loving, caring, sexual partner, men, let's say in this case, you can reverse the genders. You can reverse the gender pronouns, replace he with she, etc. Don't let me repeat this every 2 minutes. So, if you're with a healthy man as a woman, if you're with a healthy heterosexual woman, you're with a healthy man and so on and so forth, loving, caring, sexy, etc., etc., and you stray, you cheat, one-night stand, love affair, that's infidelity. That's unfaithfulness, because you had chosen another man to your man, over your man. You had a man. You had a man at home, and you preferred another man. That's unfaithfulness. That's infidelity. But the intimate partner of a narcissist doesn't have a man at home. She has a child. She has a father. Sometimes, rarely. Mostly she has a child. When she goes with another man, when she has intimacy with another man, sexual, emotional, doesn't have to be sexual, when she offers herself in any way to another man, as a friend, as a lover, it's not that she makes a choice between two men, the man at home and the man out at work, or the man at home and the man in the bar. That's not what's happening. She's not choosing another man. She's choosing a man. A man. At home she has a child. She doesn't have a man. She's a virtual single. She's single. She doesn't have a man, so she's not choosing another man. So she's not unfaithful. There's no infidelity here. So you can say, okay, so why does she stay with him? It's immoral to stay with him and to be with men. Those who remain in the relationship with the narcissist had agreed to assume the role of his surrogate mother. Why? I don't know. They pity him, or they cannot countenance hurting him. They don't want to hurt him. They see the wounded, small, frightened child crying in the corner. They can't hurt this child. They simply can't hurt him. They pity the child. So they can't dump the narcissist. They can't abandon the narcissist. But on the other hand, they need a man. They're women. They have sexual needs. They have emotional needs. They have intimacy needs. They have good time needs. They have need for fun, to have fun. They're women. And at home, what they have is a child. 100% unadulterated, unmitigated child. So it's not that they choose one man over another. It's they choose to be with a man over being with a child. And they remain with the child because they don't want to hurt the child, because they pity the child. And maybe some of them who are seriously delusional, malignantly optimistic, keep hoping that one day this child might reveal his adult side, as he had done misleadingly during the grooming phase and the love bombing phase. But they still seek fulfillment as women elsewhere, either with other men or with children, or they become workaholic. Never mind, the betrayal and the abandonment has many forms. Cheating with other men is only one. Cheating with men is only one way. There are many ways to absent yourself emotionally, or to absent yourself physically, and finally to just walk away, pack your things and walk away. It's a very complex dynamic because it is not a dynamic between two adults. It's a dynamic between an adult and a child, but a child who has expectations of an adult, that this child pretends to be an adult. And you are trapped with this insane child who thinks he's an adult. And then one day you wake up and you look at the mirror and you see a child. It's a psychedelic, bad trip, LSD, terrifying experience. Imagine that you, all your life, you thought you were a woman. You were told you're a woman. Men courted you. You had sex with men. I mean, you thought you were a woman. In a world without mirrors. And one day, you came across a mirror at the airport. You look at the mirror, and you see that you're actually a man. Can you imagine the shock? The narcissist goes through his life believing himself to be an adult, treating himself as an adult, demanding respect as an adult, fulfilling adult roles. It's role-playing. It's acting. It's play acting. He doesn't really feel in it. He feels he's playing a role, like a script. He regards his life as a movie. And then one day he passes the mirror at the airport and he looks in the mirror and he sees this tiny child, this small child. You know? Tiny child, 3 feet. Imagine the shock. Imagine the disorientation, the discombobulation. Imagine the storm, the fire, the volcanic eruption, the tectonic shift in his mind. The moment he finally accepts that he is not an adult. And so, you know, many people told me during the love bombing phase and the grooming phase, the narcissist is future faking. No, he is not future faking. I would have used this phrase had it been appropriate. Future faking is a predatory technique. It's when a predator with clear goals in mind, with a clear plan, makes false, fallacious lies and promises about the future which he knows in advance he has no intention to fulfill. It's part of a stratagem. It's a subterfuge. It's, in other words, scamming or con artistry. That's not the narcissist. He doesn't future fake. He truly believes his promises and his lies. He's entering a shared fantasy, a shared psychotic state. The narcissist is not predatory. He is acquisitive. He's not a psychopath. The psychopath is predatory. Psychopath is going to look at you and say, wow, this woman has a lot of money. I'm going to promise her marriage. I'm going to promise her children. I'm going to promise her undying love. Then I'm going to take all her money and I'm going to dump her. That's future faking. That's future faking. He's going to groom that woman to take her money. That's future faking. The narcissist takes a look at the same woman and he's infatuated. He's in love. She's ideal. She's brilliant. She's amazing. She's perfect. She's intelligent. She is the epitome and essence and quintessence of femininity. She is and she is. There's never been like her before or will ever be after, etc., etc. And then he falls for it. He falls for his own fantasy, fantastic space, his own concoction. He's not predatory. He is acquisitive. He wants to acquire her. He wants to drag her and bring her into his shared space, where everything is pink and Disneyland, where every promise becomes true just by virtue of uttering it. This is magical thinking. If I only say something aloud, it must be true. If I think something, it will manifest and become. This is narcissistic thinking. Psychopath never loses touch with reality. Absolutely not. Psychopath knows exactly what he's doing. Sometimes he loses control of his impulses. Sometimes he rages. Sometimes he's reckless. Often he's reckless. That's because he doesn't care. He rejects life. He doesn't give an S, But he never loses touch with reality. He knows exactly what he's doing. Any second and every minute, he knows to tell the difference between reality and fantasy, not the narcissist. The DSM defines narcissistic personality disorder as a disorder of fantasy. Fantasy is a psychological defense mechanism. So when the narcissist makes you promises about the future, how lovely it's going to be, how perfect it's going to be, how you're going to live happily ever after, you're going to have children, the most perfect children, and a future together, and he will make commitment and investment, and he will change himself for the umpteenth time. When he makes all these promises, he is not lying to you. He's not faking. There's no faking in this future. He really believes it's going to happen. Why? Because he said it. And because he wants it very much. The thing, you can easily see that the narcissist in this sense is a child, because children have magical thinking of this kind. They confuse fantasy and reality, wish fulfillment. It's a dream state. In dreams, we very often fulfill wishes. And when we are inside the dream, very rarely do we know that we are dreaming. Usually we think we are in reality. The narcissist's mental state is a dreamscape. It's a constant mental dreamscape, dream state. And it's easy to see that the narcissist is not an adult in many ways. For example, let's take a typical man, a healthy, normal, typical man and a woman. When there is a romantic attachment, immediately there are three triggers in both parties, male and female. There are three kind of behaviors that are triggered, and they are partly biological. There is abandonment, fear of abandonment, and fear of loss, which translates into romantic jealousy if a competitor enters the scene, a serious competitor. There is possessiveness, the intuitive perception of the other as an object, objectifying the other and rendering the other property. Now, we all do this. This is why in psychology we call people objects, because we all objectify other people. The amount of data and information about other people is so gigantic that we have to reduce and to abstract. We select a few points and we connect the dots and create an introject. We create an internal representation, which is essentially an object. So there is possessiveness and there is competition, especially with men, but not only, of course, with women as well. Adult, healthy, normal adults, when they get attached, when they get bonded, especially romantically, they show romantic jealousy, they show possessiveness, and they show competition. And so when you look at the narcissist, for example, the cerebral narcissist, no way. All he has is fear of loss and abandonment. He is not possessive and he's not competitive. He couldn't care less. He couldn't care less. His wife can be out every single night of the week, return home drunk at the small hours of the morning, and he wouldn't even bother to ask where were you, were you with, and what were you doing. He's not possessive. He is not competitive. But the second he sees a hint of a shadow of a possibility of abandonment or loss, it triggers him. And that's the only artifact in the arsenal, in the inner world of the cerebral narcissist. Loss of abandonment. Loss, abandonment, fear of abandonment, anxiety about loss. No possessiveness, no competition. Now this is typical of children. Children are not competitive and they're not possessive, but they do have enormous, tremendous, or to paraphrase another narcissist, huge abandonment anxiety, separation anxiety, fear of loss. Children have this, and they don't have possessiveness and not competitive. So children, as cerebral narcissists, are children. They're children, very young children, pre-Oedipal children, children before the Oedipus complex. Because when you as a child develop the Oedipus complex, you begin to be jealous, romantically jealous. You're in love with mother and you're romantically jealous of father, and you become very possessive of mother, and you're competing with your father. That's the Oedipal stage. Narcissists get stuck pre-Oedipally. They are not even sufficiently developed to have the Oedipus complex. They get stuck before. They're like babies. Infant formula. Risk of loss, hint of abandonment, shadow of desertion, they go crazy. Otherwise, reassure them that you're always going to be back. Yes, you're going on a vacation with another man, for 2 weeks, but you'll be back. He doesn't mind. He doesn't care. Important is your presence in his life, not to be abandoned. That's child. It's totally childlike. It's totally childlike. Some subtypes of narcissists, somatic narcissists, and especially psychopathic narcissists, they have all three. They have romantic jealousy, which is essentially abandonment anxiety transformed. They have romantic jealousy. They are possessive and they're competitive. So, somatic narcissists and psychopathic narcissists do have all three, but they have the etiology, the reason, the causation, the causes beyond these three is not the same like healthy or normal person. And also the length and the intensity of these emotions. For example, if the psychopath or the somatic narcissist becomes possessive, becomes jealous, and becomes competitive, and it's not working, he will dump you. Where the healthy, normal partner may try for months and years to restore the relationship, to recover from the infidelity, to do something, to change himself, to change you, to modify behaviors, to make new agreements, to establish communication protocols. Psychopath and somatic narcissists may be momentarily possessive and competitive, but they move on. They move on. We can go into it in another video. So women who are with narcissists, they are virtual singles. They are like single mothers with a petulant child or with a stern father at home. Many women live there with their fathers. Or many women live with a child and they're single mothers. These women date. They go out on dates. Same with the narcissist's intimate partner. She goes out on dates. She goes out on dates, or she has very intimate relationships with men. emotional or physical or both. Because at home, she doesn't have a man. She has a petulant child, spoiled brat, entitled, self-styled genius, usually, or intermittent bursts of a stern, disciplinarian, harsh father. Whichever the case may be, if you live at home with a father or you live at home with your child, you're still free to date. And these intimate partners feel absolutely free to date, or free to stray, or free to develop a parallel life at work or with their children or with their friends, girlfriends. I mean, it's like they have their private life and at home they have a child, like every single mother, you know. Dating is an outlet, it's an escape from the dreary, drab, day-to-day pedestrian tasks. And so narcissists sometimes do fulfill adult roles. They do fulfill adult roles. For example, I mentioned father. Father is an adult role. I mentioned guru. Guru is an adult role. So the narcissist does fulfill adult roles, but he plays them. He play acts them. And he plays these roles only in order to acquire the intimate partner and to lead her inexorably into the shared fantasy. Once he can take the intimate partner for granted, once he is ascertained of her permanence, object constancy, once, in other words, he is sure that she will never abandon him, the adult roles go out the window. They go out the window and he becomes almost 100% child. The adult roles are brief. They're devoid of true responsibilities, chores. There's no commitment there. It's not real. It's a role. It's a role play. And the investment in the adult roles, which precede usually the shared fantasy, the narcissist plays adult roles in love bombing, grooming, and honeymoon phases. So the investment in these adult roles is proportional to the narcissist's expectations and to the benefits he derives. There's no future faking. There is manipulation, but it's not intentional, not deliberate, not goal-oriented, not psychopathic. It's intuitive, it's reflexive. It's like animal nature. You know, it comes from the reptilian part of the brainstem. It's a manipulative ploy that involves self-delusional, self-deceiving role-playing by everyone involved. Everyone pretends it's reality when it's not. And in the initial phases, the narcissist says, okay, I will play the father, I'll play the guru, I'll play the adult. I will even make you adult promises. I'll even tell you that I'll be a great husband and a father. Anything you want to hear. I'll play the adult, but not like I'll play the adult in order to deceive you. I'll play the adult because I'm convincing myself that I can be an adult, that I can be normal if I only wish to. It's magical thinking. A narcissist with extreme object inconstancy and with abandonment anxiety, for example, a compensatory narcissist. In a compensatory narcissist, the grandiosity, the overt, obnoxious grandiosity, masks, disguises an inordinately low sense of self-worth and self-esteem. So this kind of narcissist will have an extreme object inconstancy and abandonment anxiety. And he reacts all the time, this kind of narcissist, reacts all the time with romantic jealousy to his intimate partner's infidelity or alternative double life or behavior as a single. Why? Because this kind of narcissist has constant abandonment and loss anxiety. His sense of self-worth and self-esteem and self-confidence are so low that he anticipates abandonment, humiliation, and rejection any minute. And so he is constantly in a state of romantic jealousy. Same with borderlines. Same dynamic in borderlines. But most narcissists are not compensatory. They really believe that they are superior, geniuses, gurus, amazing, perfect, brilliant, incredible, and I don't know what. So this kind of narcissists, they turn a blind eye to adultery, to betrayal, to an alternative life, to single behaviors. These kind of narcissists go about their business of securing plentiful and regular narcissistic supply. They don't care about you. They don't give a shit where you are, what you're doing and with whom, as long as you promise to be home, back to take care of your child. We must distinguish romantic jealousy from humiliation. All narcissists feel humiliated, and they feel humiliated because of their inability to lead normal lives in which they are not compelled to share their women or to give their women up to other men. It's humiliating to never have an intimate partner who is only yours, an intimate partner you don't have to share with other men. It's a very humiliating thing because you know you're crippled. It's like you are quadriplegic. You're an invalid. There's nothing you can do about it. Chronic illness generally, you know, in medicine how we call illness, chronic illness, insult. It's called insult. Serious. The clinical term in medicine is insult. It's insulting to be incapacitated, to be disabled to the point that you can't have anything that is exclusively yours, or anyone that is only yours, that you have to share with others. These are the unavoidable outcomes of the narcissist's disability and ubiquitous dysfunction. He can't, for example, provide for the needs and requirements, emotional and physical, of his intimate partner, so he has to let her share herself with other men. He can't, in business, behave as an adult. So ultimately, everyone steals his ideas or he's replaced by someone else. It's a form of cheating. You know, when your boss picks up someone to replace you, to substitute for you at work and then fires you, that's cheating. It's the exact equivalent of infidelity or unfaithfulness. And narcissists go through this kind of humiliation daily. Narcissists switch from internal to external mortification real fast. But they do at first experience agonizing trepidation and mayhem. Internal mortification is a very bad feeling. It's like an internal monologue. I'm defunct, I'm deficient, I'm deformed, I'm disabled, I'm incapacitated, I'm an invalid. I can't be normal. I can't have happiness. I can't have a partner who would be only mine. I can't keep my job. People will always prefer others to me. My intimate partner will prefer other men to me because I'm not a man. My boss will prefer other employees to me because I'm not an employee. I'm not an adult. I refuse to be an adult. I refuse to grow up. Peter Pan says it openly in the book. I don't want to grow up. It sucks. And being cheated on, that I keep mentioning, it's only the tip of an iceberg. And I'm mentioning it because being cheated on recreates the original conflict with the mother. So it's really, really bad. It's like an echo chamber of all the previous pain that the narcissist had experienced with his mother. So only infidelity, only sexual cheating or emotional cheating with men has this resonance within the narcissist, and only this can lead him to mortification. All other forms of humiliation lead to narcissistic injury. Cheating, infidelity, and unfaithfulness with men leads to mortification because it recreates the original environment, ambience of painful and hurtful childhood. But the narcissist is in a constant state of humiliation. Women cheat on him. Women abandon him. Businesses he creates go bankrupt. Projects he initiates fall apart. His long-term self-efficacy is zero. He's an imposter, and he suffers from the imposter syndrome, Helen Deutsch. There's a sense of lost agency, a sense of total external locus of control. And faced with such trenchant failure, if you were faced with such inexorable, repeatable, recurrent, inevitable, ineluctable, unavoidable failure, like guaranteed, failure and loss are guaranteed. If someone were to tell you, listen, from now on, here's a letter from God guaranteeing that everything you try to do, you try to make a family, you try to fall in love, you try to have an intimate partner, try to establish a business, you try to publish a book, whatever you try to do, guaranteed you will fail and you will lose. And even when you succeed, internally, you will consider it a failure because your standards are perfection. Your false self is unremitting It's grandiose, unrealistically grandiose, and you have the superego who tortures you, the inner critic. So you always fail, guaranteed. What would you do? What would you do if you were faced with such an internal environment? Well, there are two options. The first option is suicide. It's a form of taking internal mortification to its logical conclusion. I'm so impaired, I'm so disabled, I'm so effed up, I'm so, good for nothing. I better put an end to it all. It's suicide. That's the first rational, frankly, option. And then the alternative is to say, what causes me pain is reality, and everyone and everything in reality. Simple. I'm going to divorce reality. And I'm not going to divorce reality by becoming psychotic. That's too extreme. I'm going to divorce reality by becoming delusional, fantastic, grandiose. And that will move me from internal mortification. I am corrupt. I am decadent. I am disabled. I am imperfect. It will move me to an external mortification. Everyone is malicious. Everyone is envious of me. The world is hostile. It's a jungle out there. It's a win-lose. It's a zero-sum game. So these are the two options of the narcissist: suicide or grandiosity. It's a no-brainer. Of course you would choose grandiosity. But it's also a catch-22. Because to defend one's fantastically inflated view of oneself, to defend one's grandiosity from challenges, from stark reality, from the lack of patience and malice of other people, this brings with it its own set of humiliations, betrayals, abandonments, derision, slights, challenges, and put-downs. When you try to defend your grandiosity, you look like a buffoon. You look like a fool. And people treat you disrespectfully. Whichever way you turn, you're humiliated. You're humiliated by your intimate partners, by your recurrent failures in everything, constantly defeated. You're in a defeated state of mind. So you try to compensate for it by pretending that you are a winner, not a loser. You're a winner. You lie to yourself, and especially to others, and you force others to lie to you. Narcissistic supply, that you're the greatest, the most amazing, the most perfect, and so on and so forth. But this also brings humiliation, defeat, failure, betrayal, abandonment. There's no escape. And this is where I want you to understand. Narcissism, similarly to the chronically sick or addicts, narcissists are their disorder. You can't separate the narcissist from his narcissism. Chronically sick people have gradually become their sickness. Addicts become their substance. Narcissists become their narcissism. The disorders displace these people. Narcissism displaces the narcissist. The narcissist transmogrifies, changes, shapeshifts, and is consumed and digested by his dysfunction, from individual to dysfunction. Only the disease is left behind, having consumed and spat out the person that used to be. It's a second death. First time around, the true self dies, is sacrificed, like human sacrifice, to the new God, the false self. Then the false self proves to be not efficacious. False self proves to be not the solution. And then the disease takes over. And it's the second time the narcissist dies, in a process known as mortification. Narcissists often make you doubt your own sanity, your hold on reality, your perception of what is true and what is not. But does this amount to gaslighting? Is it the same as gaslighting? Narcissists often tell you things that are expressly untrue, counterfactual, fly in the face of everything you know and most other people know. And yet, do narcissists lie? Narcissists also insist on an autobiography that is largely made of invented material, trying to bridge gaps in memory. Are these inventions, narratives, pieces of fiction? Are these lies? Are these deceptions self-deception or other deception? And do they involve gaslighting? This is the topic of today's video. When I say he, it applies to she. Of course, half of all narcissists are women, and it applies to all settings: intimate relationships, marriages, family, friendships, the church, football club, you name it, the army, you name it. So the narcissist relates to other people. The narcissist maintains interpersonal relationships by utilizing the shared fantasy. That's the way he interacts with the world. And yes, that's the exclusive way he interacts with the world, because narcissism is a fantasy defense. Let me provide you with a few distinguishing marks, a few distinguishing points, and then we will head on to the discussion itself. Gaslighting is always premeditated. It's intentional. It is goal-oriented. The aim is to secure some goal. And it involves an asymmetry of power. The person gaslit is somehow weaker, more helpless, less resourceful than the gaslighter. Lying is lying, knowingly, deliberately, intentionally, with premeditation, making a statement that the liar knows is untrue. Now, in both gaslighting and in lying or deception, the person who commits these misbehaviors is aware of the distinction between fantasy and reality. He is firmly grounded in reality. He knows what he's saying is untrue, is counterfactual, is wrong, and yet he uses these techniques to manipulate his human environment and to secure goals. And so this is the critical differential diagnosis. If you know, if you can tell the difference between reality and fantasy, and you still gaslight, and you still lie, and you still deceive, you're a psychopath. Because narcissists cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy. Consequently, narcissists never gaslight and very rarely lie. They lie, like everyone else, white lies and so on, but they never lie as a strategy. These are psychopathic strategies. Narcissists are demented. They can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy. They're on the cusp of psychosis. That's not Sam Vaknin, that's Otto Kernberg. They're on the cusp of psychosis. They're no longer with us. And so they don't sit there scheming and cunning and planning, and they don't do this. They just lapse into fantasy. They elope. They vanish from reality. And they do it so often that 90% of their lives are composed of these kind of fantasies. So today I'm going to discuss a mechanism in narcissism known as confabulation, which superficially resembles gaslighting and lying, but is not. But before we go there, let me once and for all clarify the controversy about dissociation and disassociation. Please listen well, and please visit the website that I'm about to recommend. That is the official repository of all terminology in psychology. And if a certain word is not there, there's no such word, period. And anyone who uses it is ignorant, profoundly ignorant of psychology and the subject matter. A charlatan is anyone who claims expertise in a field that is not his. So if you're a physicist and you discuss theology, or if you're a neuroscientist and you discuss psychology, you are taking the risk of being considered a charlatan. Now, more to the point, there is no such word as disassociation. Only people who are profoundly ignorant of psychology would use this word. You don't have to believe me. I suggest that you go online to the APA dictionary, American Psychological Association Dictionary. Type the word disassociation. See what you get. Let me help you. No such word exists. And indeed, no such word exists in psychology. Case closed. Let's move on. And today we are going to discuss another word, much disputed, confabulation. Now, this word does exist in psychology, but it has had a long and convoluted history. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and many other books on personality disorders. I'm also a former visiting professor of psychology, and I'm on the faculty of SIAPS. Okay, confabulation. Confabulation, as I said, has a long history. It was first described in psychotic disorders, then in dementia. And finally, Elizabeth Loftus and others have extended the use of the word confabulation to describe any lapse of memory which is compensated for by inventing scenarios. So any situation where there's a memory gap, where you forget something, and then you invent a story or a narrative to bridge the memory gap, to somehow overcome it. We'll discuss it a bit later. Let's start with the APA Dictionary, American Psychological Association Dictionary, the authoritative body of terminology in our field, the field of psychology. Confabulation. The dictionary says, the falsification of memory in which gaps in recall are filled by fabrications that the individual accepts as fact. It is not typically considered to be a conscious attempt to deceive others. You hear that? Narcissists confabulate. They're not trying to deceive you. They're not gaslighting you. Psychopaths do. So, confabulation occurs most frequently in Korsakoff's syndrome, alcohol damage to the brain, and to a lesser extent in other conditions associated with neurologically based amnesia, such as Alzheimer's disease. In forensic context, says the dictionary, eyewitnesses may resort to confabulation if they feel pressured to recall more information than they can remember. So people confabulate, even healthy people, even normal people, when expectations are that they should remember something and they can't. Some people, most people actually, would confabulate. Confabulation is the narcissist's attempt to bridge gaps in his memory, dissociative gaps, dissociation, dissociative gaps. He attempts to bridge these gaps by constructing scenarios of what is most likely to have happened. He remembers point A in time, and he remembers point C in time. But there's something missing between A and C. And then he asks himself, what possibly could have happened? What most plausibly has happened? And what is the most probable scenario or narrative or script which would link point A in time with point C in time? And then he comes up with point B. And point B is the confabulated scenario or the confabulation. It is a theory. Confabulation is a theory of missing time. But the narcissist believes that the theory, the confabulation, is real and true. Now, there are two reasons for that. First of all, confabulation by its nature is self-deceiving, even in healthy, normal people. And that's why many witnesses insist on the witness stand counterfactually, in defiance of the facts. They insist But I've seen it, I'm sure I've seen it. But you couldn't have seen it. Yeah, but I'm sure I've seen it. So this is a feature of confabulation. It's very convincing. It's a kind of self-suggestion, hypnotic state, if you wish. This is especially true in mentally ill people with psychotic disorders, dementia, and so on and so forth. These people are unable to compare the confabulation to reality because they're divorced from reality. And that applies, of course, to a large extent to the narcissist. This is not Wagner, this is Kernberg. The narcissist and the borderline are on the cusp of psychosis. So the narcissist is unable to tell the difference between reality and confabulation. As far as he's concerned, everything that is happening inside his head has a truth value. Everything, all the internal objects, they are real. He doesn't recognize the existence of external objects. For example, you. He interacts with representations of the world in his own mind. So it's very difficult for him to say, well, you know what, you're right, this is confabulation, that's not reality. He can't do that. He can't do that because he has what we call impaired reality testing. But this is a second reason, much more powerful. The real reason why narcissists would insist that their confabulations are true and real. Now, before I proceed, confabulation is not gaslighting. Gaslighting is intentional, premeditated, involves a gradient of power, an asymmetry of power, and is goal-oriented. In short, gaslighting is exclusively psychopathic. Narcissists do not gaslight, they confabulate. And narcissists believe their own confabulation and would have a fight with you if you challenge the confabulation. They would prove to you in a million ways that the confabulation is real, has always been real, and has never been invented. That this is just a form of memory. Their confabulation is a form of memory, and by challenging their memory, you're invalidating them. They become really, really pissed off and aggressive. So narcissists protect their confabulations, defend their confabulations, because their confabulation is the last remaining thread connecting them to reality. Event B, which is totally confabulated, made of whole cloth, a total invention, a scenario, a speculation. Event B is the only thing connecting the narcissist to event A and event C. If you were to scissor or to cut event B, the narcissist would remain adrift and afloat in a sea of amnesia. That is terrifying. The narcissist protects his own integrity and his own ability to function by defending ferociously the veracity and factuality of his confabulations. But another reason to do this is because the narcissist considers himself infallible and omniscient. He never makes mistakes, and he knows everything. He's a know-all. He's godlike. He possesses the entire knowledge of mankind, and he never makes mistakes. So, because it is the narcissist who came up with the confabulation can never be mistaken. And the confabulation is informed by the narcissist's grandiosity, by his self-imputed omniscience. The narcissist says, I know everything there is to know, so the confabulation must be true. I never make mistakes, so the confabulation must be real. Defending the confabulation against challenges, defending the confabulation from being undermined, contradicted, defending the confabulation from any disagreement is a way to defend and isolate the narcissist's grandiosity from external attacks. It's not about the confabulation. It's about the narcissist's self-image and self-perception as perfect and divine. The narcissist confabulates, then he says the confabulation is real because he can't tell apart reality from internal processes. And then having promulgated the confabulation as real, the narcissist then remains committed to the reality, factuality, and veracity of the confabulation, and would fight you tooth and claw and nail to if you were to challenge the confabulation, because his grandiosity is invested in it. If he is wrong, if he's proven wrong about the confabulation, then he is not omniscient, then he is fallible, then he is capable of making mistakes, and he doesn't know everything. That would destroy him. It would constitute narcissistic injury, or if it is done in public, mortification. So the confabulation is, the narcissist emotionally invests in the confabulation. He cathects it. To a large extent, the narcissist's false self is a confabulation writ large. The narcissist's confabulations are always fantastic. They involve a fantasy defense. The shared fantasy is a confabulation as well. Confabulation may well be described as the organizing principle of pathological narcissism. Confabulation in narcissism is a cover for dissociation. Dissociation is an imperfection. If you dissociate, you're not perfect. If your memory is discontinuous and disjointed, then you're not omniscient, and you are prone to mistakes and failures and wrong judgments. So the narcissist has to deny his dissociation, because dissociation is narcissistically injurious. To admit that he's dissociating is to admit that he's mentally ill, or that he's imperfect, or that he's fallible, or that he is less than omniscient, less than godlike. He can't do that. He can never admit to his frailty and shortcomings and imperfections. Never. So he uses confabulation to cover for the dissociation, to avoid narcissistic injury, to allay and counter the challenges to his sense of superiority and omnipotence and omniscience and so on and so forth. Confabulation is a major tool in self-deception. And self-deception is the hallmark of pathological narcissism. The narcissist also desperately is trying to make sense of a chaotic, disjointed world. The narcissist samples the world. He has like samples, and then he's trying to connect the samples with a thread of confabulation. It's like he has beads, all kinds of beads, and he's trying to make a necklace. Necklace by threading the beads on a confabulation. So you see the importance of the confabulation. Confabulation holds the beads together. Take away the confabulation, the beads will scatter, and there will not be a necklace of grandiosity. The second function of confabulation is to bridge the gap between immutable internal and mutable external objects. External objects such as you, the narcissist's intimate partner, or family member, or friend, or colleague, or whatever. External objects change all the time. They grow, they evolve, they acquire new friends. External objects travel, make decisions, get jobs, get fired, move, relocate. I mean, external objects are kaleidoscopic. They can't be controlled. They can't be pinned down like a butterfly. You know, they are alive. Life is dynamics. Dynamics is change. Change is transformation. Transformation is disorientation and insecurity and lack of object constancy. It terrifies the narcissist. Your autonomy and independence and agency terrify the narcissist. Terrify, like in horror, is horrified. And the confabulation intends to connect you, the ever-changing external object, with your representation in the narcissist's mind, which is the immutable, unchanging, fixed, idealized, usually, internal object. Here's one object inside the narcissist's mind that never changes, is always amenable to the narcissist's edicts and wishes and needs, you know. And here's an external object represented by this internal object that constantly diverges and deviates from the internal object. One way to bridge this gap is coercive snapshotting. I discuss it in other videos. The other way is confabulation. By confabulating about you, about the external world, about his internal objects, by constructing a narrative or a story or a piece of fiction where all of you fit together, all of you conform to each other, the external object to the internal object to the narcissist, etc., etc. You're all one big happy family inside a storyline, a script which is counterfactual. It flies in the face of reality. But the confabulation is the glue that holds everything together. It produces a fake sense of object constancy. It reduces, mitigates, ameliorates abandonment anxiety, separation insecurity, and it creates an ambience of a secure base, maternal, like a mother. So confabulation is the dynamic, the mechanism through which the narcissist reconciles the external object with the internal object, thereby generating a sense of stability and safety that allows him to form object constancy and reduces his anxieties. Confabulation, therefore, is a major part of the shared fantasy. And finally, the third function of the confabulation is to connect the present to the past. In the present, the narcissist has a maternal object. And by the way, to be clear, the shared fantasy applies to all the narcissist's relationships with other people. All. Workplace, church, family, friends, intimate relationships, you name it. Shared fantasy is the way the narcissist interacts with the world. It's his mode of communication. He channels his narcissism through the shared fantasy in his interpersonal relationships. And yes, he and she are interchangeable. Half of all narcissists are women. Now, all people, the narcissist's friends, the narcissist's family members, the narcissist's intimate partner, narcissist's wife, even the narcissist's children, they are all converted into maternal figures within a shared fantasy. And so the narcissist needs to bridge, to connect his present with multiple maternal objects and maternal figures with the past, where he had only one maternal object, the real mother, the biological mother. Confabulation does this. Confabulation falsifies reality, helps the narcissist to view other people as maternal objects. Confabulation is the narcissist's way of converting you into a mother. The narcissist lies to himself, deceives himself, speculates on your nature, tells himself that you are actually a mother substitute. And this can be done only via confabulation, of course, because it's wrong. It's not true. It's not real. So here's another way confabulation enables the shared fantasy, empowers the narcissist within the shared fantasy, and allocates roles to people in the narcissist's life. As you can see, confabulation is not a minor issue. It's not just when the narcissist tells what are erroneously perceived as lies or gaslighting. It's not just that. It's not just when the narcissist insists on a version of events and a version of facts that has nothing to do with reality. It's not only that, but confabulation fulfills critical psychodynamic functions in the economy of the narcissist's mind, and if he were to have one, soul. Okay, Shoshanim, this lecture has not been confabulated. It corresponds 100% to reality. And you would do well to listen to it, because it would render the narcissist more comprehensible and more manageable, one should hope. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Today we will talk about abuse. Abusers exploit, lie, demean, or ignore. This is known as the silent treatment. They manipulate and they control. But they use a variety of ways to achieve these goals. There are many ways to abuse and many facets of it. Even to love too much is abusive. It is tantamount to treating someone as an extension of oneself, as an object, as a mere instrument of gratification. To be overprotective, not to respect one's privacy, to be brutally honest, to be with a sadistic sense of humor, or to be consistently tactless. All these are forms of abuse. To expect too much, to denigrate, to ignore, are all modes of abuse. There is physical abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and even legal abuse. The list is long. Most abusers abuse surreptitiously. They are stealth abusers. You have to actually live with such an abuser in order to witness the abuse and discern it. There are four important categories of abuse. The first one is overt abuse. This is the open and explicit abuse of another person. This is the type we are familiar with. Threatening, coercing, beating, lying, berating, demeaning, chastising, insulting, humiliating, exploiting, and ignoring, silent treatment, devaluing, unceremoniously discarding someone, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. They're all forms of overt abuse. But overt abuse is only the tip of the iceberg. There is a second type, which is control and abuse by proxy. If all else fails, the abuser recruits friends, colleagues, mates, family members, the authorities, institutions, neighbors, the media, teachers. In short, the abuser recruits third parties to do his bidding. He uses these to cajole, to coerce, to threaten, to stalk, to offer, to retreat, to tempt, to convince, to harass, to communicate, and otherwise to manipulate his target. The abuser controls these unaware instruments exactly as he plans to control his ultimate prey and victim. He employs the same mechanisms and devices with these intermediaries as he does with his ultimate targets. And he dumps his props unceremoniously when the job is done. Another form of control by proxy is to engineer situations in which abuse is inflicting upon another person. Such carefully crafted scenarios of embarrassment and humiliation provoke social sanctions, condemnation, opprobrium, or even physical punishment against the victim. Society or a social group thus become the instruments of the abuser against the unwitting victim or prey. So how do you cope with such abuse? By proxy. Well, often the abuser's proxies are unaware of their role. So expose him, inform them, demonstrate to them how they are being abused, misused, and plain used by the abuser. Trap your abuser. Treat him as he treats you. Involve other people. Bring it into the open. Nothing like sunshine to disinfect abusive behavior. The third category of abuse is what I call ambient abuse or gaslighting. It is the fostering, propagation, and enhancement of an atmosphere of fear, intimidation, instability, unpredictability, and irritation. There are no acts of traceable explicit abuse. There is no manipulative setting of control. Yet the irksome feeling remains a kind of disagreeable foreboding, a premonition, a bad omen. This is what I call gaslighting, after the famous movie Gaslight. In the long term, such an environment erodes the victim's sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Self-confidence is shaken badly. The victim begins to doubt himself or herself. Often the victim adopts a paranoid or a schizoid, avoidant stance and renders himself or herself exposed to even more criticism and judgment. The roles are reversed in ambient abuse. The victim is considered mentally deranged, labil, and unstable, while the abuser
is universally regarded as the suffering soul. So, how do you avoid ambient abuse? Run. Get away from the situation. Gaslighting often develops to overt and then to violent abuse. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Simply get away. You owe yourself your life. Bail out. The fourth category is covert or controlling abuse. It is composed of a few tactics. The first tactic is unpredictability and uncertainty. In professional terms, intermittent reinforcement. Let me explain. The abuser deploying this tactic acts unpredictably, capriciously, inconsistently, and irrationally. This serves to render other people around him dependent upon the next twist and turn in his mood, the next inexplicable whim, upon his next outburst, denial, or even smile. The abuser makes sure that he is the only reliable element in the lives of his nearest and dearest. And he does that by shattering the rest of the world through his seemingly insane behavior. He creates a roller coaster, a hurricane, a tornado. He perpetuates his stable presence in their lives by destabilizing their own. How do you avoid that? Refuse to accept such behavior. Demand reasonably predictable and rational actions and reactions. Insist on respect for your boundaries, for your predilections, preferences, wishes, and priorities. The second tactic is disproportional reactions. One of the favorite tools of manipulations in the abuser's arsenal is the disproportionality of his reactions. He reacts with supreme rage to the slightest offense. He punishes severely for what he perceives to be a transgression against him, no matter how minor. He throws a temper tantrum over any discord or disagreement, however gently and considerately expressed by others. Or he acts inordinately attentive, charming and tempting, sometimes oversexed. This is also a kind of disproportional, albeit positive, reaction. This ever-shifting code of conduct and the unusually harsh and arbitrarily applied penalties are premeditated. The victims are kept in the dark. The neediness and dependence of the victims on the source of justice and on the source of judgment passed, on the abuser in other words, these neediness and dependence are thus enhanced, guaranteed, nurtured, and consistently maintained. What to do? Demand a just and proportional treatment. Reject or ignore unjust and capricious behavior. If you are up to the inevitable confrontation, react in kind to the abuser's abuse. Let him taste some of his own medicine. Another tactic is dehumanization and objectification. The abuser dehumanizes his victims, treats them as objects. People have a need to believe in the empathic skills and basic good-heartedness of others. By dehumanizing and objectifying people, the abuser attacks the very foundations of human interaction. This is the alien aspect of abusers. They may be excellent imitations of fully formed adults, but actually deep inside they are emotionally absent or very immature. Abuse is so horrid, so repulsive, that people recoil in terror. It is then, with their defenses absolutely down, that they are most susceptible and vulnerable to the abuser's control. Physical, psychological, verbal, and sexual abuse are all forms of dehumanization and objectification. How to cope with it? Never show your abuser that you are afraid of him. Do not negotiate with bullies. They are insatiable. Do not succumb to blackmail. If things get rough, disengage. Involve law enforcement agencies. Tell your friends, inform your colleagues, or threaten him, legally of course. Do not keep your abuse secret. Whatever you do not keep it secret. Secrecy is the abuser's weapon. Share your plight. Never give him a second chance. React with your full arsenal to the first transgression. Abusers also abuse information. From the first moment of an encounter with another person, the abuser is on the prowl. He collects information. The more he knows about his potential victim, the better able is the abuser to coerce, manipulate, charm, extort, or convert the victim to the cause. The abuser does not hesitate to misuse the information he gleaned, regardless of its intimate nature or the circumstances in which he obtained it. This is a powerful tool in his armory. How to cope with this? Be guarded. Simply don't be too forthcoming on a first or casual encounter. Gather intelligence. Don't volunteer it. Be yourself. Don't misrepresent your wishes, your boundaries, your preferences, your priorities, and your red lines. Do not behave inconsistently. Do not go back on your word once you have given it. Be firm and resolute. Abusers engineer impossible situations. They create dangerous, unpredictable, unprecedented, or highly specific environment in which the abuser is sorely needed. Abuser makes sure that his knowledge, his skills, his connections, or his traits are the only ones applicable and the most useful in the situations that he himself has wrought. The abuser generates his own indispensability. And how to cope with that? Stay away from such quagmires. Scrutinize every offer and suggestion by the abuser, no matter how innocuous and innocent it sounds. Prepare backup plans. Keep others informed of your whereabouts and appraised of your situation. Be vigilant and doubting. Do not be gullible and suggestible. Better safe than sorry.
In a previous video I've made, I suggested a distinction between two types of gaslighting: verbal and behavioral. You could gaslight someone by talking to them, by prevailing upon them and training them, brainwashing them verbally. Language is a powerful weapon. You can weaponize language. But another possibility is to behave in ways which convey the wrong information about reality. This could also alter the mind of your interlocutors or people around you. You could gaslight by behavior. You could signal gaslighting. And so today I'm going to discuss a few variants of behavioral gaslighting, and I would put them under the rubric, under the headline, gaslighting by proxy. When you use other people, third parties, to gaslight someone. I'll focus on three examples: flying monkeys, triangulation, and the Karpman-Drama triangle. So let's put things in order. You could gaslight someone verbally. You could gaslight someone by behaving in ways which mislead people into believing the wrong things about reality. And you could gaslight someone by working with other people, with third parties, to distort reality and to make the victim doubt her judgment and perception of the world. This is gaslighting by proxy. Start with flying monkeys. Flying monkeys usually collaborate with an abuser in order to convey wrong information, misinformation, fake news if you wish. The main role of flying monkeys is to impose upon the victim an alternative view of what has happened, a reinterpretation or a revisionism of the history of the relationship, to somehow make her doubt her memory and any kind of interpretation of the memory, so that at the end, by the time the flying monkeys are done, the victim becomes highly dependent on other people for her reality testing. So she's likely to ask, is this real? Am I just imagining this? Am I making this up? Am I crazy? Flying monkeys are very powerful tools because sometimes the connection between the flying monkeys and the abuser is not known. They are the long arms of the abuser. They are secret agents. And because they pose, flying monkeys pose as objective, as neutral, their power of persuasion is much higher, much stronger than the abusers. So flying monkeys are a very important weapon in the arsenal of the abuser. And what they do is essentially gaslighting by proxy. Triangulation is also a case of gaslighting by proxy. The triangulator is not really interested in the target of triangulation. In other words, let's put it this way. Triangulation involves introducing a third party into a relationship in order to elicit an emotional reaction from your partner. So in order to get a rise out of your partner, to provoke some feelings and some reactivity or reactance. And you do this by introducing a third party, flirting with someone, sleeping with someone, collaborating with someone, and so on and so forth, in order to provoke a reaction. This is, of course, a form of gaslighting, because usually the third party that is introduced into the dyad, into the couple, is pretty meaningless. The person engaged in triangulation doesn't really care about the third party. A woman who flirts with another man ostentatiously so as to provoke her partner doesn't really care about that other man she's flirting with. She cares about her partner. She cares about the emotional reaction of the partner. She wants to get a rise out of the partner. A man who visibly and conspicuously teams up with another person in order to provoke his business partner doesn't really care about that new other person. The idea is to mold and shape the behavior of his partner, channel it in a way that is helpful and conducive and beneficial to the triangulator. The triangulation falsifies the perception of reality as it provides false information. The person who is triangulating is conveying misinformation and disinformation. The person who is triangulating is saying, this new guy or this new girl or this new partner mean a lot to me. I am even considering or contemplating abandoning you. But this is not true, because that new partner, that new girl, that new boy, that new person, they mean nothing. They're just tools. They're just instruments in the triangulation process. So the information conveyed about them, the information communicated about them is wrong. And that is, of course, the essence of gaslighting. Wrong information that reshapes the perception of reality and renders it misperception. Attribution that is erroneous, attributing motives, attributing beliefs, attributing actions, attributing traits in an erroneous way. In this sense, projection is a form of gaslighting, albeit unconscious. And finally, the Karpman drama triangle is also a form of gaslighting. In the Karpman drama triangle, there's an abuser, a victim, and a rescuer or a savior. The victim switches or shifts from the abuser to the rescuer or savior. But as Karpman has noted in his work on the drama triangle, I have a video dedicated to it, these roles are not fixed. The victim often becomes an abuser, the abuser often becomes a victim, and the rescuer and savior could become either or exit the triangle, the equation. So it's clear that the drama triangle is manipulative. Its main aim is to communicate. But it communicates not information, it communicates disinformation. The role of the savior and the rescuer is essentially a form of triangulation. This rescuer and savior is introduced into the triangle as a form of triangulation. The idea is to triangulate with the savior and the rescuer in order to modify the behavior of the abuser. But to do so, the abuser needs to be fed the wrong information about the relationship between the victim and the savior or the rescuer. And because there's a lot of wrong information communicated, channeled, and conveyed within the drama triangle, the drama triangle is an encapsulation of a private case of gaslighting. It's gaslighting, simply. These are 3 examples of gaslighting by proxy. To summarize, gaslighting by proxy is any situation where third parties are used in order to gaslight someone. They could be flying monkeys, they could be triangulators or people to triangulate with, and they could be rescuers and saviors and fixers and healers, especially self-proclaimed ones. All these cases are gaslighting by proxy. Have fun.
My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Ambient abuse, also known as gaslighting, is the stealth, subtle, underground current of maltreatment that sometimes goes unnoticed even by the victim herself until it is too late. Ambient abuse penetrates and permeates everything, but it is difficult to pinpoint and identify. Gaslighting is ambiguous, equivocal, atmospheric, diffuse, hence its insidious and pernicious effects. It is by far the most dangerous kind of abuse there is. Ambient abuse or gaslighting, they are the outcomes of fear. Fear of violence, fear of the unknown, fear of the unpredictable, the capricious, the arbitrary, the pending. Ambient abuse is perpetrated by dropping subtle hints, by disorienting, by constant and unnecessary lying, by persistent doubting and demeaning, and by inspiring an air of unmitigated gloom and doom. Ambient abuse, therefore, is the fostering, the propagation and the enhancement of an atmosphere of fear, of intimidation, of instability, unpredictability, and irritation. There are no acts of traceable, explicit abuse. There are no visible manipulative settings of control. Yet, ambient abuse yields an irksome feeling, a kind of disagreeable foreboding, a premonition, a bad omen. It's in the air. In the long term, such an environment erodes the victim's sense of self-worth and self-esteem. Self-confidence is shaken badly. Often the victim adopts a paranoid or a schizoid stance, keeps away from society, and thus renders herself exposed even more to criticism and judgment. In ambient abuse, the roles are reversed. The victim is considered by everyone to be mentally deranged and unstable, and the abuser is universally acclaimed as the suffering soul and victim. There are 5 categories of ambient abuse, and they are often combined in the conduct of the same abuser. First of all, there is inducing disorientation. The abuser causes the victim to lose faith in her ability to manage and to cope with the world and with its demands. She no longer trusts her own senses. Her skills, she doubts her skills, she doubts her strengths, she doubts her family, doubts her friends. She doubts fundamentally the predictability and benevolence of her environment. The abuser subverts the target's focus by disagreeing with her way of perceiving the world, by arguing with her judgment, by disputing the facts of her existence, by criticizing her incessantly, and by offering plausible but specious, wrong, fallacious alternatives. The abuser constantly lies, and by constantly lying, he blurs the line between reality and nightmare. By recurrently disapproving of her choices and actions, the abuser shreds the victim's self-confidence and shatters her self-esteem. By reacting disproportionately to the slightest mistake she makes, he intimidates her to the point of paralysis. Second type of gaslighting is incapacitating. The abuser gradually and surreptitiously takes over functions and chores previously adequately and skillfully performed by the victim. The victim finds herself isolated from the outer world, a hostage to the goodwill, or more often the ill will, of the abuser, of her captor. She is crippled by his encroachment and by the inexorable dissolution of her boundaries, and she ends up totally dependent on her tormentor's whims and desires, plans and stratagems. She needs his permission to go out to the world and to interact with anyone. Moreover, the abuser engineers impossible, dangerous, and unpredictable situations that are unprecedented or highly specific. And in these situations, he makes sure that he is sorely needed. The abuser leverages his knowledge, his skill, his connections, or his traits as the only applicable and the most useful ones in the situations that he himself has engineered. The abuser generates, thus, his own indispensability and fosters in the victim growing dependence. The third type of ambient abuse is what is known as shared psychosis, or previously it was called folie à deux in French. The abuser creates a fantasy world, and in this fantasy world is inhabited by himself and by his victim, and it is besieged by imaginary enemies invented by the abuser. He allocates to the abused, to the victim, the role of defending this invented and surreal universe. She must swear to secrecy. She must stand by her abuser no matter what. She must lie, fight, pretend, obfuscate, and do whatever it takes to preserve this oasis of inanity and insanity. Her membership in the abuser's kingdom is cast as a privilege and a prize, but it is not to be taken for granted. She has to work hard to earn her continued affiliation in his world. She is constantly being tested and evaluated by the abuser. Inevitably, this interminable stress reduces the victim's resistance and her ability to see straight. The fourth type of ambient abuse involves the abuse or misuse of information. From the first moment of an encounter with another person, the abuser is on the prowl. He collects information. The more he knows about his potential victim, the better able he is to coerce, to manipulate, to charm, to extort, to convert the victim. The abuser does not hesitate to misuse the information he has gleaned, regardless of its intimate nature or the circumstances in which he had obtained the information. This is a powerful tool. Finally, there is control by proxy. If all the previous tactics fail, the abuser recruits friends, colleagues, mates, family members, the authorities, institutions, neighbors, the media, teachers, anyone, any third party, to do his bidding. He uses these people and institutions to cajole, to coerce, to threaten, to stalk, to offer, to retreat, to tempt, to convince, to harass, to communicate, in other words, to manipulate his target. He controls these unaware people and instruments exactly as he plans to control his ultimate prey. He employs the same mechanisms and devices to move his third parties and proxies around as he does later to order the victim around. And he dumps his props unceremoniously when the job is done. Another form of control by proxy is to engineer situations in which the victim is forced to abuse a third party. Such carefully crafted scenarios of embarrassment and humiliation provoke inevitably social sanctions. So the victim is condemned or even physically punished. Society or a social group thus become the instruments of the abuser. He first provokes the victim into socially unacceptable behavior, and then he uses society to punish the victim.
Hello, Jackie. I'm Sam.
Hi, Sam. Welcome. It's
Thank
such
you.
an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you for having me. Today we are supposed to discuss gaslighting, I understand.
Right. Gaslighting awareness and recovery.
Right.
Yes.
So if you allow me, I will open with a kind of 3 to 5 minute introduction to gaslighting in the clinical sense. I'm a professor of clinical psychology. I'm not a clinician. So I tend to gravitate towards academic knowledge, but it's useful to agree on a terminology and then to make a distinction between the way the victim experiences gaslighting and the way the perpetrator thinks about gaslighting. So let's start with the definition. Clinically, we believe that gaslighting should include 3 elements. Number one, an asymmetry of power, asymmetry, a lack of symmetry of power, so that the gaslighter is perceived as somehow authoritative with the ability to define reality. In other words, the gaslighter has the capacity to establish what we call reality testing. Gaslighter becomes the interface to reality. That's condition number one. Condition number two is that the gaslighting, the act of gaslighting, is premeditated. It's deliberate. It's part of a plan. It involves cunning and scheming and sometimes an elaborate production in order to deceive or mislead the victim. And the third element by far the most important in my view, and that is that the gaslighter is able to tell the difference between reality and fantasy. In other words, that the person effectuating the gaslighting is not delusional. And so now let's apply these 3 criteria to the victim and to the perpetrator. See what happens. Very surprising things happen, actually, when we apply these. For example, narcissists. Narcissists are delusional. They are fully committed and invested in their fantasies. They believe their fantasies. They believe their lies and their deceptions and their promises. So narcissists actually do not gaslight and they do not future fake because they're too delusional to realize the difference between reality and fantasy, between
Right.
the world as it is and delusion. They're simply delusional, and then they delude everyone around them. Psychopaths, however, do gaslight. Psychopaths are goal-oriented. They are ruthless. They are callous. They are disinhibited. They are defiant. They are contumacious. They reject authority, and so on and so forth. And this sets the ground for an attempt to redefine reality in a way which would be highly Machiavellian, highly manipulative, and of course would result in some outcomes which are favorable and beneficial to the psychopath. So psychopaths gaslight. Narcissists fall in the trap of their own fantasies and deceptions and so on. However, from the victim's point of view, there's no difference. The victim experiences both the narcissist and the psychopath as gaslighters, because both narcissists and psychopaths try to falsify the victim's ability to grasp reality and gauge it appropriately. Both of them try to supplant the victim's grasp of reality and perception of reality with their own for different reasons. The narcissist does it because he's mired, is immured, and is immersed in fantasy. And the psychopath does it because he wants your money, or he wants to have sex with you, or he wants to have power over you somehow. But the victim couldn't care less. Because why would the victim care about the etiology or the motivations of the psychopath and narcissist? The outcome is identical. So this is kind of to set the stage for our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think it's very important to differentiate and have an understanding between both, you know, and the reason behind it. And just to introduce myself, I'm Jackie Yates, and I'm a therapist. I do group and individual therapy for many years. I also facilitate groups at Circles, and you know, Circles is a leading platform providing group therapy for narcissistic, or for navigating narcissistic abuse. And I think it's been so beneficial in helping members who feel so isolated from manipulative tactics like gaslighting, come together and connect and be able to share their experiences. Like you've said, and we will go into, gaslighting. And so I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are, Professor. Is it more of, I know it's a variety of factors, but when we're looking at the, more of is it a conditioned response or a learned behavior? Where does the distinction lie, coming from it being narcissistic to sociopathic, more manipulative, or learned, or more, grandiose in that effect? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think a better word to use would be psychopathic rather than sociopathic. But sociopath is the old term for psychopath, actually.
Yes.
So the narcissist is committed to a fantasy. It's a shared fantasy. It's a fantasy which incorporates a narcissist and the narcissist's intimate partner or friend or whoever. And the narcissist uses a distortion of reality, or distorts reality, in order to adapt it to the fantasy. The fantasy rules. Reality has to adapt. It reminds me of Albert Einstein. Someone asked him, what if your prediction regarding light passing by the sun wouldn't pan out, wouldn't, And he said, well, then the sun has a problem. So it's the same here, Reality has a problem. The fantasy rules. So this is the main motivation of the narcissist. He is not so much interested in manipulating you. Narcissists are not goal-oriented. The only thing the narcissist is looking for is what we call narcissistic supply, which is essentially attention. So narcissists are addicts. They're junkies. They're junkies of narcissistic supply. And the best way to secure narcissistic supply is to surround yourself with people who keep telling you that the fantasy is real, that your grandiosity is grounded in truth, that you're being truthful about yourself. If you say you're a genius, then you are a genius, and so on. So all kinds of fans and acolytes and sycophants. And so that's the best way to secure a regular, uninterrupted flow of narcissistic supply. And the environment that is conducive for this is a cult, essentially a cult. So narcissists create cult-like fantasies, and they fall in their own traps. They believe their own lies and fantasies and deceptions and so on and so forth. The psychopath, as I said, is goal-oriented. So if you see someone who is trying to alter your perception of reality, to alter your consciousness, but his or her goal is just some kind of adulation or admiration or securing some kind of applause or affirmation or confirmation or whatever, then that's a narcissist. But if someone is trying to alter your perception of reality and ends up saying, well, now you need to pay for this with hard cash, or now let's go to bed, or now, that's a psychopath. It ends with a goal. It ends with a... And you're right, in something you mentioned group therapy. You're right that the only way to counter gaslighting is to have a social network, to have access to other people who you can trust, other people who can provide with a counterweight to the messaging and the signaling emanating from the narcissist and the psychopath. Refusing to grant the narcissist and psychopath a monopoly on reality testing, not using the narcissist and psychopath as your only gateway to reality, but consulting others, talking to others, exposing the stratagems of the narcissist and the psychopath, and in essence, disinfecting the environment and allowing you to develop immunity to this viral infection, which shatters your perception of reality.
Well, I love that, disinfecting, because it's toxic, and, and it's a form of dissociation. Um, they they want you to not believe your own sense of reality. They want you to just have cognitive distortions, and they want you to almost believe their own cognitive distortions and bring you into their world. So they almost want to, encapsulate you, swallow you into their own world. And that's the plan. So I like what you say, is to disinfect. And so they are like, it's a viral, um, I like that. So when they are in the groups and they're sharing, and they feel that they're not alone. So and also by, you know, it's about power and control and isolation. So they now know that it's not them, and they don't feel so alone. So it's really powerful when they start to share, and you can hear that sigh of like relief. It sounds like you with my husband, or it sounds like you with my wife, or it sounds like our mothers are twins. That's what you hear in the group setting, and it's really nice how they do connect and they can share. So
Gaslighting is very disorienting. It's very disorienting. You are no longer sure of your own judgment. You lose trust in your own senses. You begin to conflate or confuse evidence with hearsay. So what the narcissist says is evidence. What the psychopath says is an absolute fact. And real evidence, hard evidence, becomes dubious. So it's a topsy-turvy world where the narcissist and psychopath's lens substitutes for reality. You give up reality. Of course, this requires certain initial vulnerabilities. We call it a pre-morbid state. This requires a pre-morbid state in the victim. In other words, not everyone would be amenable to gaslighting. There is inbuilt resistance to gaslighting in almost all of us. Now, some people take it too far and they become conspiracy theories. And some people are just engaged in critical thinking. But I would say the overwhelming majority of people are pretty immune to gaslighting. So people who do fall for gaslighting, they have inbuilt pre-morbid initial vulnerabilities. For example, they may be very insecure, generally speaking, about everything, not only about reality, especially about themselves. They may have problems with authority. They may over-respect authority. We call it over-perception. They may have an over-perception of reality, of authority. I'm sorry. They may be willing to sacrifice a lot in order to secure the longevity of the presence of the intimate partner, including their own sanity, essentially, and so on and so forth. So there may be people pleasers who will tell you what you want to hear. And
anxious
gradually this habituation, when you tell the narcissist or the psychopath, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, just to please them, gradually it becomes a form of brainwashing. You're entraining yourself. You become your own worst enemy. You self-gaslight, in effect.
Yes.
Self-gaslighting is a major component of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a collusion. It's a collaboration. It's a tango. Both participants engage in gaslighting. The one engages in gaslighting the other, and the recipient or the victim self-gaslights, adopts this framework. So if you, for example, if you're a person who fails to make sense of the world, you perceive the world as arbitrary, chaotic, threatening, intimidating, incomprehensible, and so on and so forth, then you would suspend your judgment gladly and easily when someone comes along, displays self-confidence, and tells you, I know better, or I know best. If you were just to follow me, you wouldn't be responsible for your actions then, because I will make the decisions, and so on. So this gaslighting is not limited to individual interpersonal relationships.
There's a lot of gaslighting in politics, for example.
Of course.
It's also a collective phenomenon.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you, because it's being brought up a lot in groups and individually, but also of late, gaslighting by proxy. So, obviously with the, flying monkeys, triangulation, and could it be, I wanted to ask your advice on this, narcissistic parental alienation? Could that be a form of gaslighting by proxy, where a parent would alienate their child and use the child as a flying monkey? Would the child be used as a flying monkey? Could that be by proxy?
Anyone can be used as a flying monkey. As I said before, it's a cult-like setting. You can
Yes.
set up a cult with a single adherent or a single follower, which could be your child. You can set up a cult with 40 million people, and then you become president. So these are cult-like settings. And within a cult, there is a suspension of disbelief, a suspension of critical judgment, and a total obeisance or total submissiveness when it comes to the leader. And so a cult is a hive mind. It's a single mind, actually. It's known as the cult mind in clinical literature. It's a hive mind. And when this hive mind interacts with a potential victim or with someone external, an outsider, it has the advantage of simulating a multiplicity of independent minds. So a cult mind masquerades as if it is not a cult mind, not a single mind, not a hive mind, but just an agreement or a consensus between multiple people, when actually that's not the case at all.
Yes.
So I had a friend who used to say, if someone tells you that you're drunk, you can safely ignore them. If 2 people tell you you're drunk, you can safely ignore them. But if 3 people tell you you're drunk, go to sleep. So numbers count. Numbers count. The ability to mobilize an army of yes-sayers, an army of people who would agree with you in a way. And this ability is crucial in gaslighting, because then you can destabilize the victim much more. In other words, if you're alone with the victim might still retain her critical thinking and ability to negate your messaging. But what if you confront the victim together with 10 other family members, and all of you are saying the very same thing, and none of you are telling the victim you're wrong, your perception of reality is wrong, something's wrong with you, you're crazy, you are unstable, well, that has weight. Numbers,
Yes,
quantity converts into quality in this case.
definitely. Definitely. So in your opinion, I mean, when we look at generally when we're in groups and we speak about recovery, and I think we focus on awareness and identifying what gaslighting is very important. Trying to establish or reconnect and finding trust within yourself again, because you lose a lot of trust because of loss of self-identity. And I think journaling, mindfulness, being able to fact check. One member, I remember her, she said that her partner kept on hiding the keys. She kept putting the keys in the exact same space, and he said he'd never seen them. She must be losing her mind, and so another member had actually, this was in the group, had said she should take pictures, and she started doing that, and she took pictures, and that was her reality checking, and that helped her a great deal. So she had now the evidence, and she was checking for herself, also most importantly for herself, that she wasn't losing her mind. So it was very helpful, and it was great to see that she was getting the trust back within herself. So things like that were encouraged, and just, identifying any unhealthy behaviors. And like you say, just eliminating the toxic people.
I think the minute you start to doubt yourself, I mean, the inception of gaslighting is easily recognizable. It's the first time you ask yourself, has my memory somehow gone awry? Can I trust my perception of what has happened or what is happening? The minute you start to doubt yourself, that's the onset of gaslighting. At that moment, you have to develop humility. You have to become humble. You have to say, I can no longer trust myself to gauge reality and to evaluate it and to perceive it appropriately. I can no longer do that. I've lost this capacity. I therefore need to resort to external means, such as photographs, videos, journaling, resorting to third parties as witnesses, other forms of evidence. You need to outsource your reality testing, but to outsource it preferably to outsource it to objective activities such as journaling and so on. But you need to outsource it, definitely. You no longer can trust yourself from that moment on. But to do that, you need to be humble. It requires a lot of humility. And most people lack this. So they'd rather be gaslighted or gaslit than admit that they are essentially weak and vulnerable and fragile. And so this is step number one. Then you engage in all the activities which you've mentioned, which I think are great. Yes, absolutely. You need to document reality all the time. Think of yourself, consider yourself from that moment on as a documentary filmmaker. You're a documentary filmmaker and you're documenting your life. So this is stage two, the documentary filmmaking thing. And stage three, you need to create a circle of trust. You need to surround yourself with several people, not one, not two, not three. Don't fall in the same trap again. But you need to surround yourself with two, three, four, five people whose opinions you could trust because they are disinterested. So strangely, friends are not so helpful. Intimate friends are not so helpful because they're likely to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
And there'll always be this lurking suspicion. Are they telling me this because they want to calm me down, because they love me, or are they telling me this because this is reality? So you need to rely on 3, 4, 5 people who are disinterested in you, have no interest in you, are not emotionally invested in you, not your good friends, not, your banker, your lawyer, your accountant, your 5 people, your grocery guy, I mean, the pizza delivery guy, someone with
Objective. Yes.
utterly objective. And you need to create a circle of trust. And then whenever you're in doubt about reality, you need to refer to all of them. And I call this operation, this activity, I call it polling. You need to create an opinion poll about reality. And you poll them, polling like P-O-L-L. My
Yes.
accent is very thick, I'm sorry.
No, it's great. I understand.
So
Yes.
polling, you need to poll reality among these 4 or 5 people in your circle of trust. So if you document everything as a documentary filmmaker would do, and if you consult your editorial board, this circle of trust, your producers, if you wish,
Yes.
then you're bound sooner or later to emerge from the gaslighting, because you're bound to come across so many contradictions between the opinions of the people in the circle of trust, between the documented evidence and what the psychopath or narcissists are telling you, that
True.
you will soon lose trust in them as guardians of reality, and you will have regained your reality testing. And you can do that while in a relationship with narcissists and psychopaths. You don't need to wait until you break up with them. You know, you
So
can do
true.
that while you're in there. It's very dangerous to be subject to gaslighting, because it's a manipulative, Machiavellian, it's a manipulative technique that is essentially insidious and pernicious, and as I said, in many respects, goal-oriented.
Mm.
Ultimately, the narcissist wants you to become a zombie in a shared fantasy, so you'll be zombified. And the psychopath wants to take your money or sexually assault you or have power over you in some way and get to someone else through you, and so on. So it could be dangerous. Indeed, the two movies, there were two movies in 1940. They
Yes.
were titled Gaslight. And the word gaslighting comes from these movies. And in both movies, the woman in the movie, who is the victim, is at risk. Her life is threatened. The gaslighting is an integral part of a bigger scheme to actually assassinate, kill her.
Mm.
So gaslighting is very dangerous, shouldn't be taken lightly at all.
No, no, definitely not. Definitely not. I think it's very important to as you identified, like you say, the minute you doubt yourself, everything that you said was really important. And you know, prioritize your feelings over being right.
You know, I'm going to say something a bit strange. When you're with the narcissist or a psychopath and you're beginning to doubt your reality testing, you begin to doubt your perception and gauging of reality, become a conspiracy theorist. Assume the worst. Assume that there's some kind of conspiracy against you. Develop paranoid ideation. These are pathologies. These are not healthy things. But these are not healthy things within healthy environments. But when the environment is sick, when the environment is unhealthy, sometimes some coping strategies, even though they are essentially pathological, are positive adaptations. In other words, paranoid ideation when you're with a narcissist and a psychopath is highly recommended.
Yes.
To assume that you're the subject of a conspiracy is pretty safe, actually. So do
It's
that
important. Yes.
and do your research all the time. All the time, do research. I mean, if the psychopath tells you it's 5 o'clock, run to the nearest watch. If he tells you it's Wednesday, look at the calendar. Distrust even the most evident statements which are ostensibly, distrust everything. That's paranoid ideation. Be hyper vigilant. Be on your toes. Because gaslighting starts small. It's Wednesday, it's not Tuesday. That's how it starts. It starts very small. Yesterday we ate chicken, not meat, No, you're wrong about that. It was chicken, it wasn't meat. It doesn't start big, I'm going to take all your money and rape you.
Yes.
It
Yes.
starts small.
Very small.
And that's the insidious nature.
And I wanted to just ask you also, because we get varying different cases, but some partners will agree to go for counseling, but there's a bigger, and from what I'm hearing you say, and I don't know, I mean, I've never, but there's a bigger gain. It's not for the real purpose of getting better or changing or growing or healing, shall I say.
You
So
mean when the partner is a narcissist or a psychopath?
yes,
It's
yes.
totally manipulative.
This is so, and so, and I'm going to ask you, and I've always thought, because like any, being in training and experience wise, unless a person wants to change, to grow themselves, it's not going to happen. unless you want to change for your own self. It's not, you only have control over your behaviors, your responses, your reactions. So anything's possible, but if you don't want to do it yourself, it's not going to happen, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
And if you drag your narcissistic or psychopathic partner into the therapy setting, couple therapy or whatever, that's a form of gaslighting. That's a form of self-gaslighting. You're gaslighting yourself, because the reality is this therapy would be useless. And what you're doing, you're gaslighting yourself. You're saying, no, the reality is that there's hope. This is pathological hope. That's what I call malignant optimism. It's not healthy. You'd better face reality. And the reality is that narcissists and psychopaths are hopeless. Certain behaviors of narcissists can be modified. Certain behaviors, abrasive, antisocial behaviors of narcissists can be modified in therapy. Psychopaths are completely hopeless. I mean, there's nothing that can be done, not even behavior modification. But certain behaviors can be modified, but the core issues can never be touched, untouchable. At this stage, at least, we don't have any treatment modalities that have any efficacy with narcissists. I mean, meaningful efficacy, not modifying this behavior or that behavior. So this is a form of self-gaslighting. To say I'm going to drag my partner, who is evidently a narcissist or a psychopath, or has been diagnosed even with narcissistic personality disorder, or antisocial personalities, I'm going to drag him to therapy, and the therapist will effect a miracle, and suddenly, that's self-gaslight.
Absolutely. And just at children, I think it's age 15, it might be different countries, obviously, but where an adolescent is diagnosed with conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder, is there any kind of treatment modality there that can help to try and delay a form of
oppositional defiant disorder is a very controversial diagnosis.
Okay.
Because it implies that refusal to obey authority is some kind of mental illness. And there's a lot of debate about this. Sounds a lot like social engineering or social control. However, conduct disorder is a much more validated construct. It's a much more serious diagnosis. 40% of children with conduct disorder go on to develop full-fledged psychopathy. So we consider conduct disorder to be psychopathy for children, or psychopathy light. And early interventions with children with conduct disorder are pretty efficient. Prognosis is pretty good. The problem is that in a society that is permissive, a society that is highly individualistic, a society that is increasingly more and more narcissistic and psychopathic even. There are scholars like Campbell and Twenge that they deal with these questions. In such a society, conduct disorder would be, clinicians would be very loath to diagnose conduct disorder. They would be very averse to slapping this label on a child. And consequently, interventions would come way too late, in adolescence, for example, where it's already way too late. Similar situation we have with borderline personality disorder, where diagnosticians and clinicians are very afraid to tell the patient you have borderline personality disorder, or at the very least, you're emotionally dysregulated. I mean, they're very afraid to say this. And instead, they mollycoddle and cozy up to the patient, and that's a disservice. It's a disservice. Yeah. But if a child were to be diagnosed with conduct disorder, especially prior to age 6, but even between 6 and 9 years old, then the prognosis is actually excellent. Unfortunately, the vast majority of them are not. They're diagnosed with conduct disorder in adolescence. And then it's too late. I think the
time is up.
Yeah, they told me to limit it to 30 minutes. So
sorry. Okay,
no,
well,
not your fault. Why do you assume responsibility for this? There's the two of us here.
Okay, well, it's so nice chatting to you.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you too. Okay?
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for your wisdom, your insight, your
Thank you.
experience.
Thank you
It's
for your
nice.
kind words, and I hope
Brain.
this is not the last time. Maybe we'll talk again.
You too. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too.
Bye.